Chapter 9:12. After listening to Nam's previous words, I was already mentally prepared, but when I saw the naked hound-head women, I was still extremely shocked. Even though the monster race's social system couldn't be compared to the human race, they weren't an ignorant race. How could they have such a primitive and vulgar ceremony? After a long while, I regained my composure and shook my head with a wry smile. I could only treat this as a unique culture of the hound-head race. The heads of the hound-head women in front of me were covered with a layer of black cloth, leaving only 2 small holes for their eyes. Maybe it was because hound-head men were naturally active, but these young hound-head women's bodies were extremely well proportioned. There wasn't a single trace of excess fat on their bodies. After covering their heads, even with my eyes, they still looked rather alluring. As the snow-white bodies got closer, the hound-head man on my side became more excited. He opened his mouth and panted heavily. Occasionally, he would let out a low growl, looking as though he couldn't wait any longer. Compared to the other hound-head men, Nam was relatively calm. At least he could care about me, who was beside him. He bumped my shoulder and wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth while teasing me. "How is it? Isn't it like what I said, that the girls of our green water village are all as beautiful as fresh flowers? It's a pity that you aren't willing to wear a marui outfit. You're destined to not be able to bring a girl with you today." I shook my head and didn't say anything. This fellow probably felt that I was in low spirits as he chuckled and hooked his arm around my neck. He moved closer to my ear and muttered, "However, Duo-ji, you're my good brother. I definitely won't forget about such a good thing. How about this, when you find a girl that you like, you can tell me secretly. I'll help you lure her home. At night, I'll let you enjoy the tenderness of the girls of our green water village." After Nam said that, he picked up the metal hoop from under his body and shook it in front of my eyes while chuckling. At this moment, I didn't judge the hound-head men with the moral standards of the human race. I only shook my head and rejected Nam's good intentions. Unexpectedly, he misunderstood and patted my shoulder before patting his chest. He said proudly, "You don't have to be so shy. Us hound-head men-women exist to reproduce. It's their fortune to be favored by men." I was rendered speechless by Nam. Coincidentally, there was a group of kobolds pushing against each other. I took the opportunity to retreat from the crowd and stood at an inconspicuous spot below the stage. Nam was currently immersed in his beauty and didn't notice that I had left. After the lecture, the village elder walked toward me with a smile when he saw that I had left the village. He kindly smiled at me and asked, "Little Duo-ji, why aren't you wearing a mariachi outfit? Don't you want to find a girl to enjoy?" The village elder's attire today made him look like a scholar. However, his words were as lewd as Nam's. Even though I knew that this was their culture, my heart still instinctively resisted it. I shook my head and didn't say anything. The village elder seemed to have said it casually. After seeing that I didn't reply, he sighed and turned to look at the women that were slowly walking towards the pool. He said in a low voice, "It's a pity that I'm old and my body can't take it anymore. If I was 10 years younger, I would definitely lure a few of them away and give birth to a few strong young men for our green water village." The naked women in front of me should be younger than Nam. At the village elder's age, he could at least be their grandfather. I didn't know how many times I smiled bitterly, but I still didn't know what to say. The village elder lamented for a long time that he wasn't as strong as before asking me the previous question. Seeing that I couldn't avoid it, I could only awkwardly find an excuse. I said that my internal injuries hadn't fully healed and I couldn't withstand the torment. After hearing my reason, the village elder sighed again. "Looking at your appearance, you should be a bit older than little Nam. What a pitiful fellow. After being a servant for so many years, you definitely haven't tasted the taste of a woman. Since you've returned to the tribe, it means that you've obtained a new life. The wife selection assembly is only held once every 5 years. Injuries can slowly recover, but beautiful women won't wait for anyone. Originally, our tribe had a rule that no one can take a woman away without wearing a mariachi outfit. However, I'll make an exception today and let you have some fun. After saying that, he patted my shoulder and continued, "Good luck, handsome dog-headed man. With your appearance and physique, you'll definitely make the women go crazy for you." I was stunned once again. I couldn't think of a way to reject the village elder's kind intentions. I could only bite the bullet and agree before returning to where Nam and the rest were. Seeing me return, the village elder revealed a gratified smile and shouted towards my back, "Little Duo G, don't waste the strong physique that the monster emperor has bestowed upon you." After I returned, the dog-headed women finally walked to the side of the pool and stood still, surrounding the pool that was 10 meters wide. Seeing that, the dog-headed men at the side immediately shifted their gazes from the snow-white bodies and looked towards the village elder in the distance, as though waiting for him to give an order. I also looked over. At that moment, the village elder had found a handful of withered grass from somewhere. With a solemn expression, he knelt on the ground and chanted some strange syllables. His kneeling posture was similar to Nam's last night. It was likely that he was praying to Emperor Pu. Following the village elder's movement, the other dog-headed men also knelt in the same direction as the village elder. Luckily, I stood behind the crowd and looked left and right. In the end, I still sat on the ground. The dog-headed men that knelt on the ground first barked before collectively shouting, "Honorable Emperor Pu, we are your most loyal servants. Please grant us the right to reproduce." Following that, the withered grass in the village elder's hand burst into flames. It looked as though Emperor Pu had really heard the dog-headed men's shouts. The moment the flames appeared, the village elder shouted towards the sky, "Praise my master! Honorable Emperor Pu has bestowed upon us the holy fire." After everyone repeated it, they got up from the ground and watched as the village elder raised his torch and walked towards the pool. I didn't know what the withered grass in the village elder's hand was. It looked to be only 10 inches long, but by the time he reached the side of the pool, less than an inch had been burnt. The village elder stuck the torch into the fresh soil beside the pool and retreated a few steps. He lifted his head to look at the young dog-headed men and let out a short bark, as though he was giving some sort of order. Immediately after, the dog-headed women that had been standing on the shore jumped into the pool one after another like dumplings in a pot. The huge impact caused the water in the pool to splash and fall on the torch at the side. However, it did not extinguish the fire. Instead, it caused the torch to emit a pale green smoke, which quickly enveloped everyone around the pool. I tried to take a few sniffs and found that the smoke had a faint fragrance that made me feel refreshed. However, after a few seconds my head felt heavy. My blood seemed to circulate faster, concentrating on my lower body. After a moment my body reacted. I suddenly widened my eyes as I looked at the dog-headed women playing in the pool. I felt that every inch of their skin was filled with temptation. Their heaving chests seemed to have an irresistible power that pushed me forward several steps. This situation was truly strange. I slightly frowned. After a short moment, I circulated the spiritual power in my body to clear my head. I turned my head to look at the torch that was still emitting green smoke. It was most likely that there was some kind of poison in the torch. After I got rid of the drug, I looked at the dog-headed men. They looked even worse than I had before. The dog-headed men were naturally tall and sturdy. Under the almost translucent mariwine, they looked like beasts. All the dog-headed men, including Nam, were drooling at the corners of their mouths. As they swayed their bodies, they quickly untied the chains around their waist. Without the restraints of the chains, the mariwine retreated to the back of their necks, almost exposing their entire bodies. At that moment, they walked to the side of the pool and shouted. One of their hands grabbed the end of the chains, while the other hand held onto the hoop. They were aiming for the head of the women in the water. Chapter 9:13. The dog-headed women floating in the water were like beautiful mermaids, while the iron hoop in the dog-headed man's hand was now a fishing hook. Every time the hook was thrown, the mermaids didn't dodge or evade. Instead, they rushed forward and took the initiative to drill into the hoop. Nam's cultivation was stronger than the others, so his speed was naturally not something others could match. In less than half a minute, he had already pulled 3 women up. However, he did not seem to be satisfied with this. He continued to swing the iron hoop in his hand towards the most graceful woman in the center and firmly landed on her neck. However, before he could pull her to the shore, another iron hoop appeared on the woman's neck. Seeing that someone was trying to snatch it, Nam's face instantly turned angry. He turned to look at the dog-headed man who threw the iron hoop. That dog-headed man's figure wasn't any inferior to Nam's. Under the stimulation of lust, he didn't have the slightest intention of backing down. He also glared at Nam. During courtship, no race would easily back down. Nam's aura immediately surged and his originally light blue pupils turned scarlet. His fangs also appeared in his mouth as he continuously barked at that person. Nam's barking was very loud and clear. Even though I was standing far away, my ears were still ringing. The dog-headed man who was fighting with him no longer had the aura from before. He lowered his head and didn't dare to fight with Nam anymore. At the same time, the woman who was being fought over in the water also took off the other iron hoop from her neck and threw it to the side. After the victor was decided, Nam withdrew his aura in satisfaction. He reached out his hand and pulled. Another woman was obtained. After a short 15 minutes, there weren't many women left in the pool. However, the surrounding people still didn't have any intention of stopping. At that moment, there were already 5 women standing next to Nam. He seemed to be planning to stop, but after he turned to look at me, he started to wander around the pool again. Not long after, the iron hoop in his hand moved again. He threw it forward and steadily landed on the neck of a woman, pulling her out of the water. Following his movements, the originally burning torch suddenly extinguished. Immediately after, the village chief's loud shout came through the smoke. Emperor Prior's bestowment time is over. Children, please stop. Perhaps it was because they were wary of the village chief's orders, or perhaps they were extremely pious to Emperor Prior, but many of the metal hoops they had just thrown out were forcibly pulled back mid-flight. All of the kobolds stopped their movements. Following the village chief's shout, the smoke that pervaded the surroundings also dissipated. There was a smile on the village chief's face as he walked around the crowd. When he arrived in front of the kobold man who was standing with 3 or 4 women, he would stop and look at him carefully before patting his shoulder with a gratified look in his eyes. When he walked in front of Nam, he found that there were 6 women standing beside him. He immediately laughed and said, "Good, good, good. You are indeed the pride of our green water village. Little Nam, you've received Emperor Prior's favor." Nam was originally grinning foolishly, but after hearing the village chief's words, he immediately put away the joy on his face. He knelt towards the north and shouted, "My beloved Emperor Prior, thank you for your generous reward." The village chief walked to the side of the pool with satisfaction, but the smile on his face had disappeared. He stared at the women in the pool that hadn't been pulled ashore and sighed deeply. "Children, it's unfortunate that you didn't receive the monster emperor's favor. You can't marry our strong and brave kobolds. According to the tribe's rules, you can only be sold to Rock City as slaves. However, you are still the children of Green Water Village. I really can't bear to sell your bodies to outsiders to trample on." After hearing that, I suddenly recalled how the village chief had tried to persuade me. An ominous feeling rose in my heart. Luckily, the village chief didn't change the topic to me, but pointed at the kobolds on the shore. "Today, I'll make an exception. You must use your sincerity to move the strong kobolds on the shore. As long as someone throws the metal hoops of fate to you, you can also follow him home and continue to live in Green Water Village." Just as he finished his sentence, the remaining kobold women in the pool frantically crawled towards the shore. Their eyes were filled with desire and urgency. I had heard from Nam that the monster race had a strict hierarchy. The kobolds had an extremely low status in the wolf race. According to the decree of the monster race's monster emperor, there would be a day every year that was designated as a slave day. It wasn't a day that was designated to free the slaves, but on this day, many of the inferior races would be sent to the nearby cities to be slaves. For the stability of the wolf race, other than this day, slaves could only be obtained through trade. Most of the slaves were boys and girls. As they had unlimited strength, they could be ordered around for a long period of time. They could even be used by their masters to vent their bestial desires. Once they were made into slaves, there would be a slave mark that could never be washed off on their faces. These marks were the symbol of the slave owner's wealth. Not only that, the slaves would never be able to return to their homeland. They would be exiled after they grew old until they died. This was the most terrifying thing for the inferior races, especially for the females. It was a nightmare. However, at the same time, it was something that was inevitable under the monster race's rules. In order to avoid becoming a slave, the kobold girl in the pool didn't care about anything else. She continuously showed off the curves of her body in the water, hoping that the males on the shore would throw her a lucky olive branch. In actual fact, during the previous ceremony, the kobold's actions were extremely chaotic. The females that were taken away might not be as outstanding as the ones that were left behind. However, the strange thing was that the kobolds that were previously trying to take away more females frowned. None of them waved the iron hoop in their hand. Many of them even turned around and ignored the females. After a few minutes, there was still no one who threw the iron hoop. The females in the pool also knew that it was impossible for them to escape the fate of becoming a slave. Their hands gradually stopped moving, and they started to sob softly while covering their faces. I frowned as I watched from the side. However, I could only act as a bystander and watch the development of the situation in silence. After confirming that no one was willing to accept, the village chief's face no longer had the tenderness from before. Instead, it was replaced with a stern expression that had never been seen before. He straightened his body and adjusted his tall hat before saying solemnly, "I'm sorry, children. The monster emperor didn't give you a final chance. Tomorrow you will follow the merchant group to Rock City. This is the fate of us kobolds. I hope that you will be able to find a good job in your employer's family." The village chief sighed. After saying that, he couldn't bear to look at the crying females anymore. He turned around and prepared to leave. However, at that moment, a sharp and familiar voice resounded from the forest in the distance. "Hold on, Village Chief Bill. I'm willing to bring them home." The sudden voice instantly attracted everyone's attention, including the village chief and Nam. They all turned to look at the forest on the right. At that moment, a few figures appeared in the forest and walked over from afar. The person at the front was also wearing a black marijuana outfit. The iron chain around his waist was at least 3 to 4 times thicker than Nam's, but there was no iron hoop. As they got closer, they realized that it wasn't that he didn't have an iron hoop. It was because the iron hoop was too big and couldn't be hung under his crotch. He could only let the people behind him, who were wearing regular clothes, carry it on their shoulders. I felt that the voice was familiar. After they got closer, I saw clearly that the person at the front was Gale from the Wolf tribe, whom Nam and I had met a few days ago when we were picking herb. The people behind him were also from the Wolf tribe. I had some doubts. He wasn't a kobold, so why was he wearing a marijuana outfit? Could it be that the kobold's wife selection ceremony allowed outsiders to participate? With doubts in my mind, I turned to look at Nam. I realized that all of the kobolds, including Nam and the village chief, had angry gazes. They were panting heavily as they glared at Gale. In the face of so many angry gazes, Gale didn't care. After coming closer, he looked at the naked dog-headed women standing behind Dunham. He suddenly sneered. I've been watching from the forest for a long time, but you've only finished now. Dog-headed people are just dog-headed people. They can't do anything well. Chapter 9:14. Dunham didn't like Gale's malicious expression, so he snorted and turned his head away. Facing Dunham's attitude, Gale didn't care. Instead, he faced the village chief and said, "Long time no see, my village chief Bill. Today you look like a dog-headed person, but to be honest, this white dress doesn't suit you dog-headed people at all." When I met Gale and the others in the jungle, Dunham told me that Gale had been taught a lesson by the village chief. Cowardice is the nature of dog-headed people, but the courage of the jackal race is no less than theirs. I don't know what Gale is relying on today. He actually swaggered into Green Water Village, and even spoke rudely to the village chief and Dunham. After listening to Gale's words, Bill's complexion sank and he coldly said, "Gale, today is our dog-headed people's event. Don't think about making trouble." Gale wasn't frightened by the village chief's appearance. Instead, he motioned to the people behind him to place the huge iron hoop on their shoulders in front of him. Then, Gale pointed to the iron hoop on the ground. His eyes stared straight at the dog-headed woman who was still sobbing in the pool. He said, "Since I'm wearing a Mayuri dress, naturally I'm here to participate in the wife selection event. Don't tell me I'm here to look at your skinny dog-headed person's body?" Although his description of the dog-headed person's body was somewhat extreme, but in front of Gale and the others, even the strongest person in Green Water Village, Dunham, was a size smaller. Not only that, but Gale's muscles were clearly defined without any excess fat. This kind of obvious disparity wasn't only due to the difference in cultivation level, but also due to the difference in race's bloodline. Being humiliated like this, the surrounding dog-headed people instantly exploded. They gritted their teeth as they stared at Gale. Some even tried to rush up and make a move, but were stopped by the village chief. Seeing such a scene, Gale's face was full of arrogance, but now he was even more proud. The village chief's expression didn't change. While Gale was laughing, he coldly said, "This wife selection event is our dog-headed people's tradition, not your jackal race's. Therefore, you are not qualified to participate. Hurry up and leave Green Water Village while I still have some tolerance for you." Gale's laughter stopped, but there was a bit of ridicule on his face as he replied, "Dear Village Chief Bill, don't you know that our noble and majestic Emperor Prior issued a decree last month? In order to promote harmony among the various Yao tribes, Emperor Prior had specifically permitted friendly interactions between the villages, including occasions such as the Wife Selection Conference. As the village closest to Green Water Village, our Qingshan village's jackal tribe is also qualified to participate." The dog-headed men of Green Water Village were bewildered when they heard Emperor Prior's decree. They subconsciously turned to look at village chief Bill, hoping to get a definite answer from him. The village chief's face turned gloomy. After a long while, his face finally squeezed out a trace of a smile. He looked at Gale and said, "I, as the village chief of the Green Water Village, naturally know the decree of the Demon Emperor. But even so, you won't be able to take any of the holy kobold women away. According to the tradition of the kobold tribe, once the sacred fire is extinguished, the wife selection conference must end immediately." After saying this, the village chief's face eased up a lot. Regarding the tradition that he spoke of, Dunham and the others continuously nodded to confirm it. Although the dog-headed men's faces were still filled with anger, their demeanor was obviously a lot more relaxed. But at this moment, Gale's face revealed a treacherous smile. He didn't say anything and directly took out a dried medicine from the arms of his follower behind him. It was exactly the same as the one that the village chief had ignited earlier. The dog-headed men were instantly stunned. Even village chief Bill was dumbfounded and couldn't speak. Gale didn't pay attention to them. He turned around with the people behind him and knelt down towards the north. He pointed the medicinal herbs in his hand forward, His eyes filled with longing as he loudly shouted, "Respected Emperor Prior, I am your most loyal servant. Please grant me the sacred fire to search for the light." Even a vulgar person like Gale was incomparably devout when he prayed. When the people of Green Water Village heard the prayer, they didn't dare to forget to show their respect to Emperor Prior even at this moment. They quickly knelt down together and deeply buried their heads in the ground. Just when everyone was holding their breaths, Gale rubbed his hands together and a burst of fire appeared in his palms, directly igniting the dried grass. Seeing the medicinal herbs ignite into a raging fire, the dog-headed men instantly cried out in alarm. Village Chief Bill's face was full of sorrow. His hands were tightly clenched into fists, and the veins on the back of his hands were exposed. It was obvious that he was extremely angry. When Gale and the others finished their prayer and stood up, the Green Water Village's dog-headed men were silent. The dog-headed woman in the pool had already put down her hands and walked towards Gale and the others. The longing in her eyes couldn't be concealed. For them, it didn't matter whose wife they became. As long as they weren't sold to Rock City as slaves, any choice should be understood. As Gale leisurely inserted the torch into the corner of the pool, the people behind him also lifted the huge iron hoop and were about to throw it towards the dog-headed woman's neck. But at this moment, Village Chief Bill finally couldn't suppress the anger in his heart. A ball of demonic energy appeared in his hand, and the iron hoop was sent flying to the shore. Immediately after, the village chief roared, "Gale, I don't know why you have the monster emperor's favor, but these women are the wealth of our dog-headed tribe. As the village chief of Green Water Village, I will not allow outsiders to rob us of our wealth." It was obvious that Village Chief Bill had temporarily given up on his reverence for the monster emperor. Instead, he was talking to Gale about wealth. Hearing the village chief's words, the originally low morale of the dog-headed men suddenly became excited and let out a burst of barks in agreement. Gale didn't think that the village chief would dare to disobey the will of Emperor Prior. His face became gloomy as he coldly said, "Village Chief Bill, do you really want to disobey the decree of Emperor Prior?" Gale once again used the decree of the monster emperor to intimidate the crowd, but the effect wasn't obvious. The village chief's eyes only twitched a few times before he loudly replied, "The decree of the monster emperor is naturally effective, but we dog-headed men only welcome friends, not robbers. And you, Gale, are 100% robbers. We dog-headed men can only deal with robbers with our fist." Saying such words, it was obvious that Village Chief Bill already had a plan in mind. He directly took a step forward and coldly stared at Gale. The dog-headed men's anger finally broke out at this moment. Following the village chief's action, they simultaneously took a few steps forward. Many of their eyes had already turned red. After taking a few steps, they didn't wait for the village chief's order and directly rushed forward. They surrounded Gale and the others, revealing their fangs as they vented their anger. Although their aura was strong, their cultivation was only at the initial stage of demon soldier. Not only Gale, but even the few jackal tribesmen behind him had disdainful expressions. They simply didn't put them in their eyes. At this time, Village Chief Bill opened his mouth to call back those people, but before he could speak, the jackal tribesmen took the initiative to attack. In an instant, the dog-headed men who surrounded them were sent flying more than 10 meters away. They fell on the ground in the distance, constantly struggling and couldn't get up for a long time. Seeing that their companions were injured, the remaining dog-headed men became more and more manic. They stared at the jackal tribesmen, ready to make a move. But at this time, Village Chief Bill stood up and berated them. Finally, they stopped their footsteps. At this time, the village chief himself took off the tall hat on his head and handed it to Nam, who was not far away, for safekeeping. Then, he angrily went in front of Gale and the others. Seeing that Village Chief Bill intended to personally take action, Gale's face was still full of disdain. Not only did he not retreat, but his eyes carried a trace of pride. Seeing this scene, I frowned. Gale's current cultivation was only at the late stage of demon soldier. Although village chief Bill was already old, under the suppression of an entire realm, Gale simply wasn't his opponent. Why was he so calm? Chapter 9:15. Bill seemed to have realized that something was wrong. He didn't hastily attack Gale. Instead, he looked at the people behind him, as if he was wary of them suddenly making a move. However, at this moment, Gale suddenly opened his mouth, and black smoke shot out of it. Bill was only a few feet away from Gale. Moreover, Gale's movements were too fast, so he wasn't prepared for it. In the blink of an eye, he was blinded by the black smoke. At this time, Gale's aura surged. His originally waxy arm suddenly turned into a dog's paw. He immediately slapped Bill's chest, sending him flying more than 10 meters away. As the village chief's body fell to the ground, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His face instantly turned pale. I didn't know what that black smoke was, but it made the village chief unable to open his eyes. Moreover, he had received a heavy blow from Gale, so he didn't have the strength to fight back. I didn't know what secret technique Gale had used, but he was able to cross a realm and severely injure the village chief. Fortunately, he was somewhat worried about Bill's identity, so he only made him lose his fighting strength. After dealing with Bill, Gale became even more unscrupulous. He laughed crazily as he walked towards us with his followers. The dog-headed people of Green Water Village naturally knew how strong Bill was. At this time, seeing the village chief being easily knocked down by Gale, the dog-headed people who were originally shouting that they wanted to break Gale's leg bones were now stunned. They stood there motionlessly. When Gale walked towards them, they collectively showed fear. The dog-headed people were originally a timid race. Especially in front of such absolute power, they could only tuck their tails between their legs and bow their heads in silence. When Gale arrived in front of the crowd, his tail was raised to the sky. He arrogantly scolded the dog-headed people. The lower races are so lowly. I think your Green Water Village should be removed from the village. However, before that, I will have to work hard to bring all the girls in your village back home. This will prove that dog-headed people once existed. The village chief's injury had taken away the courage of the dog-headed people. They lowered their heads and listened to Gale's humiliating words, but no one dared to make a sound. Only Nam's eyes were still filled with anger. He was constantly gasping for breath. The blood in his eyes became more intense, and the fangs in his mouth grew by half an inch. All the kobolds were silent. Dunham roared and threw the iron hoop in his hand towards Gale. The furious Nam was extremely fast and arrived in front of Gale in the blink of an eye. Naturally, Gale had already noticed him. His body slightly flashed and avoided Gale's attack. Instead, he calmly tidied up his clothes and sneered. "Genius Nam, what are you doing? Stand up for these trash." Seeing Gale constantly bullying his compatriots, Nam's face was extremely gloomy. He coldly replied, "Gale, don't go too far. Today is a festival for us kobolds, yet you brought people here to cause trouble. The village chief originally wanted to let you off, but you pushed your luck and even injured the village chief. In that case, I don't care about the rules anymore. I'm going to seek justice for our Green Water Village." After saying that, Nam was about to attack again. But this time, before he could pounce in front of Gale, he was intercepted by the followers behind him. Gale's followers were all at the late stage of demon soldier cultivation. Naturally, Nam couldn't fight against so many people. Not long after, he was pressed to the ground by the crowd. Gale's face was full of contempt. "Genius Nam, with your cultivation, you're not even qualified to help me pick lice." Following his words, the people who were pressing down on Nam's arms fiercely slapped his chest. Nam couldn't get rid of these people's control and couldn't avoid the attack. After receiving such a heavy blow, blood spurted from his mouth, and his eyes instantly blurred. However, those people didn't seem to intend to let Nam go. They raised their palms and were about to slap him again, but in the next second, they were stopped by Gale. I naturally didn't think that Gale had any mercy. Since he could injure the village chief, he probably wouldn't care about Nam's identity as a lowly commoner. I only saw Gale shake his head and move in front of Nam. "I heard that you intend to participate in the Sade Academy selection? What a joke. You dog-headed people are a useless race. You actually want to tarnish the most sacred Sade Academy in the wolf tribe. You really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth." After saying that, Gale lightly snorted and lifted his leg to fiercely kick Nam's body. This kick was powerful and heavy. Even under the control of the two jackal clansmen, Nam was kicked away and fell to the ground, unable to move. After getting rid of Nam, Gale waved his hand and pointed at the group of dog-headed men from Green Water Village. With a sinister smile, he ordered his followers to break the leg bones of all the dog-headed men that were present today. As for the remaining women, they were to be brought back to Qingshan village. Once these words were spoken, the dog-headed people who originally didn't dare to make a sound immediately panicked. One by one, they threw away the iron chains in their hands and scattered in all directions. At this moment, the village chief who was lying on the ground suddenly roared, "Gale, let my children go. I'll agree to whatever you want." The village chief covered his eyes with an indescribable expression of pain on his face. However, after Gale heard this, he lightly snorted and walked over. He looked down at the village chief and sneered, "Dear village chief Bill, it would have been good if you had this attitude from the beginning. It's a pity that the lowly people of Green Water Village don't know any better and broke the rules. You can't blame me for this." The village chief's eyes showed despair. After a long sigh, he suddenly turned around and shouted, "Little Nam, quickly run." He obviously wanted to protect the most talented Nam in the village. However, Nam was also severely injured. Not to mention running, he didn't even have the strength to stand up. After hearing the village chief's words, he struggled to raise his head to look at me. His mouth that was dripping with blood opened and closed. With a weak voice, he shouted at me, "Duo-ji, quickly run." After witnessing everything that had happened in front of me, I restrained myself from making a move. Firstly, my power was different from the monster race's aura. If I used the talisman, it would easily arouse their suspicion. Secondly, I didn't understand the method that Gale used to injure the village chief, so I wasn't sure if I was his opponent. However, at this moment, Nam was still thinking about me in such a miserable situation. This made my heart feel complicated. After a few seconds of silence, I sighed and lifted my foot to walk towards Gale. Gale's back was originally facing me, but he was quickly reminded by his follower. He turned around and sneered when he saw that it was me. "It seems that you dog-headed people still have some courage. It's a pity that you're trash. In my eyes, you're not even as good as a bunch of dog's tail grass." I naturally didn't pay attention to his words and took out a fierce yang talisman from my Xiang Lu bag. After infusing my qi into it, I hid it in my palm. When I walked in front of Gale, he extended his palm towards my face. I was already prepared and immediately turned to his side. The talisman followed my palm and landed on his back. In the next second, there was an explosive sound and Gale's body was instantly ignited with a raging fire. The fierce yang talisman was the most commonly used talisman when my cultivation wasn't high. It was also the strongest talisman that I could use at this moment. The talisman's fire was incomparably strong and had the ability to expel evil spirits. In the raging fire, Gale instantly fell to the ground. He miserably howled as he constantly rolled on the ground. I didn't dare to be careless and took out a few more talismans in preparation for his counterattack. Although Gale's cultivation was only at the late stage of monster soldier, he shouldn't have the power to retaliate under my talismans. However, the method that he used to deal with village chief Bill was able to severely injure a late-stage monster spirit. I had to be vigilant. However, the strange thing was that Gale didn't make any move to counterattack. He just rolled on the ground and struggled for a long time before finally extinguishing the raging fire on his body. After the talisman's fire was extinguished, Gale seemed to be completely exhausted. He lay on the ground and panted heavily. He didn't get up for a long time. A ball of raging fire appeared out of nowhere, causing everyone to stop what they were doing and look over at the same time. Their eyes were filled with surprise, but they hid far away and didn't dare to approach. It was obvious that they were afraid of the raging fire. Even the few jackal clansmen that Gale brought were the same. At this moment, Nam, who had been lying on the ground without any movement, suddenly laughed wildly and loudly said, "Gale has done evil and angered the monster emperor. This is the monster emperor's holy fire." Chapter 9:16. After the jackal tribe left, I quickly went to check on Nam's injuries. Luckily, he only suffered some internal injuries and his meridians weren't damaged. On the other side, the village chief had already recovered quite a bit. He stood up from the ground and looked at the tragic scene around him. He sighed and didn't say anything else. He just told everyone to go home and rest. After the other dog-headed men left, the village chief brought Nam and me back home. After returning, he didn't care about his injuries and examined Namu thoroughly. He also took out some medicine for Namu to consume before asking me to bring him back. Before he left, the village chief patted Nam's head and told him that the pill to increase his cultivation would be ready in 2 days. He told Nam to use these 2 days to recover from his injuries so that it wouldn't affect his absorption of the pill. Even though we had experienced so many things today, the village chief had obviously tossed all the honor and humiliation to one side as he waited for Nam to grow. When Nam and I returned home, we were surprised to see 6 identical jars of mud at the entrance. I didn't know what they were for, but after Nam saw them, a smile flashed across his originally painful face. He seemed to be very proud of himself. Just as I wanted to ask, the courtyard door was suddenly pushed open. Grandmother stretched her body out and behind her were 6 well-dressed dog-headed women. I was stunned for a moment before I reacted. They should be the women that Nam had tricked. When Nam and I went to the village chief's house, they had found their way here. Seeing that Nam was injured, Grandmother couldn't help but ask about it. However, after knowing that it was the dog-headed man, she only sighed and didn't say anything. After dinner, after a tiring day, we went to sleep early. Since there were 6 women in the house, Nam and I had to squeeze into one bed. After Nam fell asleep, I sat cross-legged and prepared to meditate for a while. Using the talisman today had consumed quite a bit of my energy. I had originally planned to cultivate and replenish the energy in my body. However, due to the thin spiritual power in the monster region, I hadn't replenished my energy even after cultivating for a long time. While I was annoyed, I suddenly had an idea. The spiritual power in the monster region was thin, but the ancient savage energy was abundant. I had the monster emperor's bloodline, so it shouldn't be a problem for me to cultivate monster energy. With that in mind, I tried to breathe in the savage, desolate ancient aura. After a while, the 2 acupuncture points in my body that had recovered emitted monstrous energy. I was overjoyed and continued to cultivate. After 15 minutes, due to the abnormally abundant ancient desolate energy, the demonic energy in the 2 acupoints had surged to the extreme. Without my control, the demonic energy directly charged towards the other acupoints that hadn't recovered yet. Just now, after testing that I could indeed absorb the monstrous aura, I also thought of using the surging monstrous aura to sort out my broken meridians. However, I still had some misgivings in my heart. After all, my understanding of monstrous aura wasn't enough. If I made any careless mistakes, it was highly possible that I would suffer even more injuries. However, the monster energy automatically attacked the other acupuncture points, and I couldn't stop it. I could only wait anxiously for the result. Soon, the monstrous energy reached my acupuncture points that hadn't recovered yet. I felt a surge of energy coming from my acupuncture point. My heart thumped. In essence, the recovery of acupoints was a healing process. It should produce a cool and comfortable feeling. Now, the acupoints felt like they were on fire. It was very likely that the acupoints were injured again. Just as I was about to forcefully stop the monstrous aura from entering my body suddenly shivered. I found that my acupuncture points were automatically absorbing the surrounding ancient desolate energy. I was stunned. Being able to absorb and cultivate meant that the acupoints had recovered. Moreover, as the ancient desolate energy surged into my acupoints, the surge of energy gradually disappeared. On the contrary, the other acupoints that had been attacked felt a surge of energy. Not long after, 3 more acupoints recovered due to the impact of the monstrous aura. At the same time, they started to absorb the ancient desolate energy. After all 6 acupoints were filled with monstrous aura, I carefully sensed that I had already entered the sealing acupoint realm, which was the monster race's monster spirit realm. It seemed unbelievable that I had instantly reached the monster spirit realm from the monster soldier realm. However, in reality, there were more than 10 acupoints in each of the 8 meridians. Now that 6 acupoints had recovered, it was equivalent to half of the meridians operating. With my original cultivation, it was normal for me to recover half of the meridians and reach the sealing acupoint realm. I was pleasantly surprised. Previously, I couldn't move my acupoints for a long time due to the impact of the Taoist and witch energy. However, now that I could absorb the ancient desolate energy, my recovery speed would undoubtedly be much faster. Of course, this was only in comparison to my previous speed. In reality, I would need at least a few years before I could fully recover. I naturally didn't want to stay in the monster race for a few years. If there was a chance, I would have to search for high-grade beast dawn to speed up the recovery process. The night passed without any words. When Nam woke up on the second day, his body had recovered quite a bit. His spirit was also much stronger than the previous day. It seemed that the medicine that the village chief gave him had taken effect. After I woke up, Nam told me about yesterday's event. He asked me, "Duo-ji, did you think that yesterday's events were strange?" I shook my head. "How was it strange?" Nam continued, "A few days ago, when we met the green arrow snake while gathering herbs, there was a sudden lightning bolt that struck it to death. Today, Gale was attacked by the holy flame and the same thing happened. Don't you think that these 2 events are too coincidental?" I frowned. Many people saw me using the scorching sun talisman yesterday, but my actions and identity were concealed, so it shouldn't have raised any suspicions. However, I had already used the lightning talisman in front of Nam previously. Combining the 2 events, it was normal for Nam to be suspicious. Of course, I wouldn't explain anything to him. I only frowned and thought about how to cover up this matter. Who knew that before I could say anything, Nam suddenly became emotional and pulled my hand. The village chief said that the monster emperor is everywhere and has been watching over every single one of the monster race. I didn't believe it in the past, but now I really believe it. The heavenly lightning and holy flame must have been purposely released by the monster emperor for me. His emotional expression made me laugh in my heart. However, this was also good as it allowed him to firmly believe in the existence of the monster emperor, which would clear my suspicions. After Nam prayed and thanked the monster emperor, he said to me emotionally, "The monster emperor is so concerned about me. He definitely wants to guide me to lead the dog head race from the lowly race to the noble race. When that time comes, we won't be bullied by the dog head race like Gale anymore." Upon saying that, he clasped his hands together and prayed again. "Great and respectable monster emperor, please bless me to get into Sade Academy and bless me to lead the dog head race to become the nobles of the monster domain. For this, I'm willing to sacrifice everything, including my soul." After he finished praying, I asked him curiously, Didn't you say that the monster race's bloodline is divided into the noble and the lowly? Could it be that after you become stronger, you can change the bloodline of the doghead race? Nam shook his head. The bloodline is bestowed by the monster emperor, but whether it's noble or lowly, we have to fight for it. Just like the doghead race, they are the cousins of the doghead race. Even though they are stronger than us, their status is the same. After Gale's sister got into Sade Academy, the doghead race's status jumped above us. I was shocked. Just getting into an academy could actually increase the status of the entire race. It seemed that the monster race's emphasis on education and talents wasn't any worse than the human race. After ending our conversation, Nam and I walked out of the house. At this moment, my grandmother was leisurely lying on a rattan chair and looked at the busy women in the courtyard with a gratified expression. She muttered softly, "Our Nam is really fortunate to be favored by the monster emperor. I wonder how many fat boys he's going to give birth to." Grandmother's words made Nam smile. His legs weren't very nimble at this moment, but he walked out of the courtyard and looked at the neatly arranged earthen jars and giggled. When I returned yesterday, I was already curious about these earthen jars, but I didn't have the chance to ask. Now that I saw Nam's current expression, I couldn't help but ask. Nam smiled and told me, "This is the tradition of us doghead race. During the wife selection ceremony, we can place a few earthen jars at the door of our house. The more earthen jars there are, the stronger the man in the house is and the more women he can conquer." As he said that, Nam's face was filled with pride. I smiled and shook my head. The monster race's culture was completely different from the human race. The human race was reserved while the monster race was much more unrestrained. Maybe it was due to the stimulation from the jackal race, but for the next 2 days, Nam didn't go anywhere. He didn't even touch the 6 women that he had captured. He just continuously cultivated and recovered. When the village chief finished refining the elixir, the injuries on his body had also completely recovered. 2 days later, Nam and I had just finished our breakfast when the village chief sent someone to inform us that the elixir had already been refined. After hearing the news, Nam instantly jumped up from the ground and happily barked a few times. I was rather curious about the monster race's elixir, and also wanted to directly feel the power of the beast pill. Thus, under Nam's urging, I followed him to the village chief's house. After entering the house, I noticed that the fire in the village chief's house had already been extinguished. The green pot on top was still boiling. It was obvious that the elixir had just been refined. The village chief's elixir didn't look like the elixir that I had imagined. It was still in liquid form. The village chief poured the liquid into a bowl and passed it to Nam. At that moment, Nam couldn't wait any longer. After receiving the bowl, he didn't mind that it was hot and raised his head to drink it. After drinking it, he still felt like he hadn't had enough. He smiled and asked, "Village chief, is there more?" The village chief smiled wryly and reached out to knock his head. "Little Nam, do you think this is cold water? This big pot of elixir can only be used once. After boiling it for so long, there's only 1 bowl left." After knowing that there was only 1 bowl, the smile on Nam's face disappeared and he sighed. "If I had known earlier, I would have drunk it slower and left half a bowl for Duoji. Even though it can't completely heal his injuries, it should still be of some help." After saying that, Nam looked at me apologetically. His hands continuously fiddled with the clay bowl on the table. It was obvious that he was feeling down. Chapter 9:17. We stayed in the village chief's house until late at night, but there was still no reaction from Nam's body. It was the village chief's first time refining this kind of elixir, so he wasn't sure when it would take effect. Late at night, Nam wanted to go back, but the village chief insisted that he stay. He said that he wanted to see the effects of the elixir with his own eyes. Thus, Nam and I stayed in the village chief's house. After midnight, Nam suddenly screamed. The village elder and I were startled awake. When we got up, we saw that Nam was sitting on the ground. He was naked, and steam was rising from his body. His eyes were bloodshot. I was a little worried, but the village chief happily stroked his beard. This is the effect of the elixir. From his appearance, it seemed that everything was under his control. This situation lasted for several hours. During this time, the village chief was worried that Nam would get dehydrated, so he asked me to pour a bucket of water on his body every hour. After I did it, nothing unexpected happened. Only when the sun rose did the dehydration on Nam's body dissipate. He fell to the ground and fell asleep again. The village chief walked over and checked his body. After confirming that he was fine, he told me, although Nam didn't advance to the monster spirit realm, he's already at the peak of the monster soldier realm. Next, he just needs to stabilize his realm, and he should be able to reach the monster spirit realm. After sleeping for half a day, Nam woke up in a daze. After knowing that his cultivation had advanced, he became happy. However, he had the same goal as the village chief, so he wasn't too courteous. He just promised that he would work hard to pass the Sade Academy's exam. Nam's promise wasn't just for show. In the following period of time, he seemed to have forgotten about the 6 women. He wholeheartedly focused on his cultivation, cultivating hard every day. Seeing that he was working hard, I also started to cultivate hard. Ever since I had tried to absorb the wild ancient energy, I had found a way to gradually recover my cultivation. As long as I stimulated my acupuncture points with monster energy every day, although the recovery speed was slow, it shouldn't be a problem for me to protect myself in the Dog-Headed Man tribe, as well as in Rock City. Half a month later, I opened another acupuncture point, and my cultivation increased to the intermediate stage of the monster spirit realm. However, in this short period of time, Nam's cultivation didn't increase at all. He still hadn't reached the monster spirit realm. Nam had been excited at the start, but now, he was depressed all day. Looking at him, I pondered for a while and decided to help him. The structure of the demon race is the same as the human race. The main reason why the Dog-Headed Man's talent is bad is because when the demon soldier advances to the demon spirit realm, he opens too few meridians. Nama was currently trapped on this node because his acupoints could not be opened. The human race had created many cultivation methods that could stimulate the acupoints directly. At this stage, everyone would try their best to open up as many acupoints as possible to lay a solid foundation for the future. However, the demon race didn't have many exquisite cultivation techniques, especially for a low-level race like Nam. They could only mechanically absorb the ancient savage chi and forcefully open a meridian to enter the demon spirit realm. With only one acupoint, he would not be able to achieve much in the future. After understanding this, I took the opportunity while Nam was cultivating to come next to him. I placed both of my hands on his shoulders and channeled my monster energy into his body. I used the techniques from the death scripture that I had cultivated in the past to stimulate his acupoint. If I had my previous cultivation, I could have done this easily, but now, stimulating Nam's acupoints wasn't any easier than restoring my own acupoints. After working hard for half a day, I only managed to help him open up 2 acupoints. Although these 2 acupoints were enough to support Nam's cultivation to enter the demon spirit realm, I wanted to see if the lowly Dog-Headed Man could also become a powerful demon after obtaining stronger talent. Thus, I told Nam to stop cultivating temporarily. After a few days, I guaranteed that he would be able to reach the demon spirit realm. Even though Nam trusted me, cultivation was too important to him. He didn't know if he should agree or not until I told him that I had learned a secret technique from my previous master that could help him become a powerful monster. He finally believed me after I told him that I had learned a secret technique from my previous master that could help him become a powerful monster. In the following 10 days, he had been suppressing his cultivation and had me help him clear his meridians and acupoints every day. After a full 10 days, he went from being inexperienced to being familiar with it. After 10 days, I had completely opened up 2.5 meridians in Nam's body. After that, I told Nam that he could break through to the demon spirit realm. Following the opening of his acupoints, Nam seemed to have felt something. After getting my permission, he didn't want to wait any longer. He sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes to enter a state of cultivation. However, after just 2 minutes, Nam opened his eyes again and asked me in disbelief, "Duo-ji, have I already reached the monster realm?" I smiled. This fellow probably didn't dare to confirm that he had successfully advanced so quickly, so he asked me out of the blue. Actually, after his acupoints were fully opened, Nam only needed to circulate his monster energy through all of his acupoints and he would automatically reach the demon spirit realm. This was also the main reason why I told him not to cultivate for the past few days. Nam was stunned for a few minutes before he finally came back to his senses. A huge smile bloomed on his face as he hugged me in celebration. The next morning, he left early. By the time he returned, everyone in the village had heard the news. The happiest person was naturally the village chief, followed by Nam's grandmother and the 6 women. That night, I slept in separate rooms with Nam. Nam had finally completed his mission of carrying on the bloodline of the dog-headed people. Not long after, it was the day to head to Rock City. I had already decided to head to Thad Academy to search for the Beast Core, so I would head out together with Nam. Early that morning, Nam stood at my door with a huge cloth bag on his back. Through the gaps of the cloth bag, I could faintly see the dried meat inside. Nam's face was filled with excitement as he urged me to hurry up. When he saw that my hands were empty, he lowered his head and pondered for a while before saying to me, "Duo-ji, it will take 5 to 6 days to travel from Green Water Village to Rock City. There will be ferocious beasts along the way, so you should bring some self-defense weapons." As he said that, he took out a long bone from the cloth bag. It was similar to the drumstick that was used to beat the drum during the wife selection ceremony. Seeing that I was looking at the beast bone, Nam proudly introduced it to me. "This is the primer beast's leg bone that the village chief gave me. When the village chief went out to study, he used it to chase away countless ferocious beasts. The village chief said that he had specially soaked it in medicinal water for many years. He guaranteed that with one swing of the stick, he would be able to smash the head of a ferocious beast." After the introduction, Nam stuffed the beast bone into my hands and said, "I'm a bit stronger than you, so you can use this." He naturally had good intentions, but I still shook my head and rejected him. This thing wasn't a magic tool, nor did it have any other special properties. It was just a bit harder, but it wouldn't be of much use to me. It was obvious that Nam really liked this thing, so I didn't want to steal it from him. Seeing that I still wasn't willing to accept it, Nam finally gave up on trying to persuade me. At the same time, he promised me that he would protect me on the way. I grinned and nodded in agreement. After we left, the courtyard was already filled with people. They were all villagers of Green Water Village. They were carrying large and small bamboo baskets with all kinds of food in them, dazzling me. The one leading them was the village chief, Bill. When he saw us come out, he quickly walked forward and took out 2 cloth bags from his chest and handed them to Nam. "I just finished preparing these things today. Luckily, I made it in time." Nam wanted to open the cloth bag to see what was inside, but the village chief stuffed it into Nam's chest and explained, "There are some elixirs inside. When you're outside, it's inevitable that you'll stumble upon some green foxtail grass. If you're injured, use these elixirs to treat your injuries." The other bag contains the gold coins that Uncle Chu Wang got from selling herbs in the city. After paying the registration fee for Thad Academy, there should still be some left. Rock City is different from our Green Water Village. When the time comes, use these gold coins to find a place to rest. Only when you're full of energy will you be able to participate in the selection. After hearing the village chief's words, Nam's eyes were already filled with tears. He choked with sobs and couldn't speak. The village chief patted his shoulder and said goodbye with a loving expression. Little Nam, the journey is long. You must be careful. Saying that, the village chief turned to look at me. You too, little Duoji. After saying our final goodbyes to the village chief and grandmother, Nam and I finally walked out of the house. We left the village and headed north. Rock City was directly north of Green Water Village. When he first left the village, Nam was still immersed in the sadness of parting. When Green Water Village completely disappeared behind him, Nam became happy and looked forward to the future after he successfully entered Thad Academy. Nam was very happy, but I was a little emotional. Directly north of the village was the desert where I was saved by Nam. Unknowingly, I had already been in the monster region for more than a month. My cultivation had only recovered to the pressure point realm. I don't know how long it will take for me to return to the human world. Chapter 9:18. After walking through the dry desert for a day, even someone as strong as Nam was exhausted and constantly complained. If I knew this would happen, I would have ridden the Caspi beast. I'm about to die from exhaustion. We've walked for so long and we still haven't seen the Cross Forest. I don't know how much further we have to go. The Caspi beast that Nam mentioned was the beast he was riding on when I first met him. Before we left, I suggested that we bring it along as it would save us a lot of energy. However, the village chief said that the Caspi beast had a huge appetite and we didn't have much rations on us. Moreover, there were many ferocious beasts along the way. The smell of the Caspi beast was too strong, and we might become the target of the ferocious beast. As for the Cross Forest that he mentioned, it was the destination that the village chief had planned for us for the day. According to the plan, we had to reach the outskirts of the Cross Forest before stopping to rest. Under Nam's continuous complaints, we walked for a few more hours. Only when the sky darkened did we finally cross the desert and reach the edge of the Cross Forest. Seeing the forest shrouded by the dusky sky, Nam instantly became spirited and excitedly said, "After walking for so long, I've almost finished all the water I brought. The Cross Forest is so big, there must be many delicious wild fruits inside. Just thinking about it makes me drool." As he said that, he was about to rush into the forest, but I quickly stopped him. Before we came, the village chief had told us that there were ferocious beasts running amok in the Cross Forest. It was said that there were even monster generals, so we couldn't enter at night. After my reminder, Nam didn't seem to care and said, "This is only the edge of the forest. Even if there are ferocious beasts, their cultivation level won't be that high. What are you afraid of?" Even though he said that, his footsteps finally stopped and he didn't bring up the matter of picking wild fruits anymore. That night we camped next to the forest to rest. After a night's sleep to replenish our energy, we had to enter the Cross Forest the next day. Although the village chief had told us to be careful when we arrived, he didn't know much about the forest's specific situation. Just to be safe, I told Nam to take out the beast bone hammer before we set off in case we needed it. Nam obviously didn't care about the forest and casually patted my shoulder. "Duoji, don't worry. Even if we meet a ferocious beast, I can protect you." After he finished speaking, he carried the beast bone hammer and swaggered into the Cross Forest. As soon as they entered the forest, the surroundings became much cooler. It must be because there was no sunlight here all year round. The weeds in the forest almost reached up to a person's waist. There were only a few narrow paths for people to pass through. The deeper we went, the darker the surroundings became. My vision was greatly obstructed, and I had to slow down. Besides having to be vigilant against ferocious beasts, the venomous insects in the dense forest couldn't be ignored. Especially in a place like this where the ancient savage chi was dense, it was even easier for unusual creatures to breed. Nam walked in front, using the long bone in his hand to chop the surrounding weeds, trying to open up a path. After walking for around an hour, we didn't find anything strange. Only then did we relax. During the journey, my remaining spiritual sense had been spread out to investigate the surrounding situation. Up until now, I hadn't found any traces of ferocious beasts. Instead, I saw 2 fist-sized fruits hanging on a short tree that wasn't even 3 meters tall, about 10 meters to our left. They looked bright red and extremely alluring. The reason why I noticed these 2 wild fruits wasn't because I was a glutton like Nam, but because I had read an ancient book of the witch race in the Medicine King Valley. There was a type of strange fruit called the spiritual Dan fruit, which was extremely similar to the red fruit in front of me. I stopped in my tracks and carefully examined it for a moment before confirming that it was the spiritual Dan fruit. In the witch race's ancient book, the spiritual Dan fruit was an extremely rare item in ancient times. It contained a large amount of spiritual energy. Consuming it could increase the strength of one's meridians, open up one's acupoints, and increase one's innate talent. Seeing such a good item, there was naturally no reason not to take it. Thus, I hastily stopped Nam in front of me and pointed at the short tree for him to take a look. Seeing the 2 large red fruits, Nam's eyes instantly lit up. Without needing me to say anything, he walked over in a few steps and climbed up the tree to pluck the fruit. After returning, Nam wiped the spiritual Dan fruit a few times before choosing a slightly bigger one and passing it to me. His eyes were full of smiles. This wild fruit is really big. Just looking at it makes me salivate. As he said that, he swallowed the fruit in his hand. After a few bites, he was still unsatisfied. I ate it too quickly. I haven't tasted anything yet. I found it funny and passed the spiritual Dan fruit in my hand to him. You should eat this too. I don't like these wild fruit. Although this spiritual Dan fruit was rare, it didn't have much use for me. Nam obviously had the same intention. He chuckled and awkwardly scratched his head. However, his hands didn't slow down as he received the spiritual Dan fruit from my hand. After taking a few bites, he swallowed it. This time, he intentionally tasted it. However, after eating it, his face was filled with doubt. He frowned and said, "Could it be that the fruit isn't ripe yet? Why doesn't it have any taste?" The spiritual Dan fruit was formed from the accumulation of spiritual energy. In the cross forest, the energy stored in it was basically ancient energy. It was too strange to have a taste. I didn't explain to him, and was about to urge him to continue on his way. At that moment, Nam suddenly roared and clutched his stomach. At the same time, his eyes turned scarlet. It was my first time seeing the spiritual Dan fruit, so I naturally didn't know what would happen after consuming it. However, looking at Nam's current appearance, it was most likely that the ancient energy in the spiritual Dan fruit had stimulated the bestial nature in his bloodline. As he roared, Nam laid on the ground. He clenched his fists tightly and continuously hammered the ground. A moment later, he tore his clothes into pieces with both hands, revealing his muscular body. A few seconds later, he stood in front of me completely naked. He stared at me like a beast staring at its prey. It was obvious that Nam had lost his mind. Just as I thought that he was going to attack me, Nam crouched down and repeated the action of hammering the ground. At that moment, the monster aura on his body became denser and denser, causing his body to gradually grow. In just a short moment, he had grown a lot taller and the muscles on his body swelled up. I frowned and pondered for a while. I was worried that the ancient energy in Nam's body would explode, so I formed a sword with one hand and walked to his side. I extended my hand to press on the Yuzhen acupoint on the back of his head. The Yuzhen acupoint was an acupoint that allowed people to sleep soundly. The monster aura in my body surged out from my fingertips and stimulated his Yuzhen acupoint. Nam's roar suddenly stopped and his body heavily fell to the ground. After a short moment, there was a series of snoring sounds. While he was unconscious, I retracted my spiritual power and stabilized the aura in my body. I placed both of my hands on Nam's back and gathered monster aura to guide the vigorous spiritual power in his body. The ancient energy in the spiritual Dan fruit was extremely violent and rampaged around Nam's body. With my current cultivation, I didn't dare to forcefully control it. I could only slowly infuse my monster aura into it to guide the ancient energy. Under my guidance, the ancient untamed aura gradually calmed down. Xiali mixed with the monster energy in Nam's body, but I still couldn't completely relax. This spiritual power was too strong for Nam. If he wasn't careful, it would explode again and he would still be in danger. Thus, I tried to guide the spiritual energy to circulate through Nam's meridians and use it to strengthen his meridians. After the spiritual energy in his meridians was balanced, I then pushed the remaining portion into Nam's meridians in the sky. After doing all of that, Nam's body finally returned to its original state. However, the torn clothes on his body couldn't be recovered, so I could only find a set of clothes from my luggage for him to change into to hide him from the mosquitoes. After busying myself for a long time, I was extremely tired and decided to sit cross-legged next to Nam to regulate my breathing. In the dark forest, it was impossible to estimate the time of day. After an unknown amount of time, Nam finally woke up while rubbing his head. After crawling up from the ground, he exclaimed, "Duo G, wake up! How did we fall asleep? This is bad, this is bad. It's definitely dark now." Chapter 9:19. Before we left, the village chief had told us many times that we couldn't spend the night in the cross forest. Regarding the village chief's warning, Nam kept it in mind. He picked up the luggage from the ground with one hand and pulled me with the other as we hurried forward. After walking for close to an hour, Nam's anxious mood gradually calmed down. He looked around and awkwardly scratched his head before asking me, "There's no sunlight here, so it feels like it's already evening. But in reality, we didn't waste too much time, right, Duo G?" I roughly estimated that from the time Nam ate the elixir fruit to the time I helped him sort out his meridians, it had only been less than an hour. Including the time I slept, it was only around 2 hours, so it wasn't evening yet. However, I wanted to scare Nam, so I said, "That's hard to say. From what I can see, it's not even evening yet. We should hurry up and continue on our journey. Who knows, there might already be some beasts eyeing us." I was just casually saying that, but I didn't expect that the moment I said that, there would suddenly be a rustling sound coming from behind us. The sound came from afar, and it was obvious that it was coming towards us. The surroundings were extremely quiet, and the sound was very sudden. It scared Nam so much that he quickly grabbed the beast bone hammer in his hand. At that moment, I had already spread out my spiritual sense and quickly found a long snake that was quickly slithering towards us. It was similar to the green arrow snake that we met in the forest outside of Green Water Village, but its body was much larger than the previous one. In less than a few seconds, the scaled insect raised its head and stood not far behind us. Previously, I had only sensed it with my spiritual sense, so I didn't feel that it was that terrifying. However, after seeing its true body, even I couldn't help but be shocked. This snake's cultivation was only at the intermediate stage of the monster spirit realm, but it was extremely large. When it stood up, it was at least 6 meters tall. Its body was covered in fiery red scales, and its pupils were green. It looked exceptionally peculiar. After seeing its appearance, Nam couldn't help but exclaim, "It's actually a undead spirit snake." It was obvious that Nam recognized this snake. Just from its name, it was obvious that it wasn't a good creature. I turned to look at Nam. He was currently staring at the giant snake that was sticking out its tongue. He continued to explain to me, "This type of undead snake is very strong and it can spit out poisonous gas. Once you are hit by its poisonous gas, you will instantly be paralyzed. You will be unable to do anything but watch helplessly as you are swallowed." After listening to Nam's explanation, I furrowed my brows. The undead serpent's enormous body already took a lot of effort to deal with. I didn't expect it to be an even greater threat. I didn't dare to be careless and whispered to Nam not to panic. As long as we split up, he would only care about his head and not his tail, and we would be able to kill him. These words seemed to have given Nam a lot of confidence. He immediately let out a low roar and moved behind the undead snake with the beast bone in hand. Seeing Nam start to move, I didn't dare to delay and quickly moved my feet. The departed spirit snake's head was several meters tall, so it wasn't easy to attack it. After thinking for a while, I decided to attack its abdomen. When I arrived in front of it, Nam had already hit the back of the departed spirit snake with his club. Nam had previously said that the primer's leg bone was extremely hard and had been soaked in medicinal liquid for a long time. One hit from the club would be able to break the skull of a ferocious beast. That was indeed the case. After Nam succeeded, I could hear the sound of bones breaking even though I was a few meters away. However, Nam's strike wasn't fatal. The departed spirit snake felt pain and immediately lowered its head. At the same time, it used its strong tail to sweep towards Nam. Dog-headed people were nimble to begin with, and this was even more evident in the face of such a huge beast. Before the snake's tail could be raised, Nam had already moved to the other side. Seeing this, I didn't dare to be negligent. My hands were filled with monster energy and I instantly turned my palms into fists and punched the departed spirit snake's abdomen. After receiving another heavy blow, it momentarily lost its sense of propriety and didn't know where to attack first. However, the departed spirit snake had thick skin and flesh. Even after receiving multiple blows, it didn't panic. Its cold eyes were filled with brutality. Occasionally, it would look at Nam beside me and occasionally at me, as though it was trying to find a way to break through. I beckoned Nam to attack together with me in order to get rid of it as soon as possible. Nam understood and in the next second, Primer's leg bone landed on the departed spirit snake's back. At the same time, my heavy fist landed on its abdomen. After receiving another blow, the brutality in the departed spirit snake's eyes finally dissipated a little and was replaced with fear. It turned its body and turned its huge head in between Nam and me, preparing to escape. Seeing that it wanted to escape, I stopped my attack. After all, we were only in a hurry. As long as it didn't obstruct us, there was no need for me to take its life. However, Nam didn't seem to want to let it go. Following the departed spirit snake's movements, Nam's legs suddenly stomped and he instantly appeared in front of the departed spirit snake. As the saying goes, don't chase a cornered enemy. At this moment, the departed spirit snake was obviously extremely brutal. Seeing that Nam was blocking its way, it instantly spat out a dark purple smoke. The smoke contained a dense monster aura. It was probably the departed spirit snake's unique poisonous gas. Nam obviously didn't expect that to happen. He didn't even have time to react before the poisonous gas covered his entire body. In an instant, Primer's leg bone slipped from his hand and fell to the ground, giving off a crisp sound. At the same time, Nam's strong body swayed a few times before collapsing. Seeing Nam collapse, the rage in my heart rose. The monster aura in my body surged as I hastily rushed over. However, before I arrived, the departed spirit snake lowered its head and bit Nam. It twisted its body and escaped again. When I arrived, there was only the snake's tail left in front of me. I reacted quickly and grabbed it. I wanted to keep it here, but snakes and insects had smooth, oily skin. Moreover, the undead spirit snake was very strong. It didn't wait for me to grab it. It wriggled a few times, and its tail escaped from my hand, fleeing far away. The departed spirit snake's speed was extremely fast. When I was slightly stunned, it was already more than 10 meters away. By the time I took a few steps forward, the departed spirit snake had already disappeared without a trace. I frowned and started to ponder. The departed spirit snake's cultivation was only at the intermediate stage of the monster spirit realm. Even if it could increase its speed for a short period of time, it wouldn't be able to maintain it for a long period of time. Moreover, it had been severely injured by Nam and me, so it definitely wouldn't be able to escape far. After analyzing it, the anxiety in my heart eased. Previously, when we entered the cross forest, I had left an imprint on Nam's body. Very quickly, I felt the imprint's location. After taking a deep breath, I immediately chased after it. The ancient aura in the cross forest was extremely dense and could isolate the monster aura. However, because of that, the imprint was extremely clear. I didn't need to carefully sense it, as it was like a huge lighthouse that guided me in the right direction. After a few minutes, the movement of the imprint slowed down. After 15 minutes, it completely stopped. It was most likely that the departed spirit snake had already returned to its nest. I didn't dare to give it time to devour Nam, so I immediately sped up and quickly chased after it. I arrived at a tree that was wide enough for 10 people to surround it. The imprint stopped in the huge tree. I raised my head and saw that there was a hole that was a few meters wide that was less than 2 meters above the tree trunk. Without a doubt, this should be the departed spirit snake's nest. I climbed up the tree hole in a few steps and peeked inside. It was pitch black inside and I couldn't see anything clearly. After pondering for a while, I took out a fierce sun talisman from my Xianglu bag and activated it with my remaining spirit chi before throwing it into the tree hole. With the help of the fierce sun talisman's light, I could finally see the scene inside the tree hole. The space inside the tree hole was extremely spacious. I didn't see the departed spirit snake on the ground, but I saw a male and a female half-beast man lying on the ground. The male had a robust body and a spirit chi imprint on his body. It was Nam. As for the female, she had long ears and looked like a rabbit. She was probably the food that the departed spirit snake had brought here. The light from the fierce sun talisman was limited. Although I hadn't found the departed spirit snake yet, I didn't know if Nam was dead or alive. I didn't dare to delay and immediately jumped down from the hole to the snake's nest. As soon as I steadied myself, I heard a hissing sound in front of me. I threw out another burning sun talisman to illuminate another direction. Only then did I see the spirit snake coiled around a dozen meters in front of me. It was glaring at me with a sinister expression. There was another man lying beside it. This man's body was coiled with many young snakes of different sizes. These young snakes looked similar to the departed spirit snake, so they were most likely its offspring. Chapter 9:20. Seeing this, I wasn't in a hurry to deal with the undead snake. Instead, I quickly walked to Nam's side to check on their situation. Luckily, the two of them were only unconscious from the poison and weren't injured. However, it seemed that they wouldn't wake up anytime soon. Immediately after, I stood up and walked towards the undead snake. Seeing the greed in its eyes, I decided to teach it a lesson. However, I didn't expect the beast to be so cunning. It actually brought Nam here and intended to use him as its food. No matter what, I couldn't let it live any longer. Seeing me approach, the undead snake's expression became even more furious. It lowered its head to look at the little snakes that were eating at its side. It let out hissing sounds, probably urging them to run for their lives. When the little snakes heard that sound, they lifted their sharp heads and looked at me. There wasn't a trace of fear in their eyes. I didn't take it to heart. As long as I could deal with the undead snake, the rest of the little snakes weren't worth mentioning. In the next second, I circulated the monster energy in my body and wrapped Primer's long bone in my hand. My speed increased by several folds as I charged towards the undead snake. Seeing that I was so fast, the undead snake suddenly twisted its body and used its body to block the little snake. After that, its powerful tail rose from the ground and swept towards my waist. The undead snake's bones had almost been broken by Nam's previous attack. Now that it was attacking, its strength and speed were greatly reduced. The undead snake's attack methods were too simple. Apart from its physical attacks, it only used its dark purple poison gas. I already understood all of this. Before the snake's tail could get close to me, I had already leaped to the other side of the snake's tail and easily dodged the attack. Seeing that I was agile, the undead snake finally showed a panicked expression. It twisted its body and let out hissing sounds, urging its offspring to escape first. I wasn't sure if it was trying to stall for time or if it knew that it couldn't escape today, but its originally green eyes revealed a few traces of scarlet. Its aura was much stronger than before. The difference between beastmen and beasts was that the beasts were in their primitive state and their attack methods were extremely simple. No matter how much the undead snake increased its aura, it was all useless in my eyes. Seeing this, I sped up and appeared in front of the undead spirit snake in the blink of an eye. The snake seemed to realize that danger was approaching. It swooped down and opened its stinky, scarlet mouth, aiming to bite me. It had to be said that after the undead spirit snake's aura increased, its speed was much faster than before. Before the bone in my hand could fall, the head of the snake was already 2 feet above my head. The toughest part of a snake was its scales. I couldn't guarantee that I would be able to kill it with this strike. Just to be safe, I jumped and dodged the snake head that was charging at me. When I landed, I was already behind the undead snake. On its back, there was still a mark left by Nom. I waved the primer's leg bone in my hand and smashed it down on that spot. As the long bone fell, the sound of bone shattering could be heard. Previously, Nom relied on his strong physique and only used brute force to deal with the undead spirit snake. Even with a few heavy strikes, he couldn't hurt the undead spirit snake at all. However, I had used the demonic energy in my body for this strike. In terms of strength, I wasn't inferior to Nom at all. Moreover, under the situation where I used my demonic energy, the already weak undead spirit snake couldn't withstand it. In the blink of an eye, the undead spirit snake's back, that had been hit, had sunk 2 feet deep. The blood-colored spine had pierced through its skin and flesh. The snake's originally thick and sturdy body was now tightly pressed against the ground, like a piece of crushed meat. After receiving such a heavy strike, the undead spirit snake instantly felt pain. The snake head that was originally parallel to the ground raised up once again and let out a painful roar. At the same time, the strong and powerful snake tail immediately lost its vigor and swayed back and forth on the ground. Seeing this, I didn't intend to give the undead spirit snake a chance to catch its breath. The vital point of a snake was 7 inches below its skull. However, the undead spirit snake's body was humongous. When it stood up, it was at least 10 feet tall. Moreover, due to the pain it had just suffered, its head was raised even higher. It wouldn't be easy to hit it 7 inches. Thinking about that, I leaped onto the snake's body and reached the middle of the undead spirit snake in just 2 to 3 steps. The primer's long bone in my hand was about to land on the snake's body. Perhaps it was because the pain from the previous attack had made its nerves even more sensitive. My current actions were actually detected by it. It immediately turned its head to bite me again. The undead spirit snake's eyes were no longer green. Every inch of its body was crimson red. Perhaps it was because of its extreme anger. The originally cold-blooded undead spirit snake was now emitting heat. Its temperature was getting higher and higher, to the point where it was slightly scalding. I didn't think that the undead spirit snake still had some hidden tricks up its sleeve. However, in my opinion, it wasn't a cause for concern. The moment the long bone in my hand landed, the huge snake head appeared 2 meters above my head. Under this heavy blow, the originally opened mouth widened even more. In the next second, a ball of dark purple smoke formed in the undead spirit snake's mouth and was about to spit it at me. I had already witnessed the might of the poison. Even if my cultivation was higher than it, I wouldn't dare to take it head-on. Fortunately, I had already been on guard against such a trick when I had attacked the undead spirit snake. Thus, I didn't panic when I saw it. Immediately after, I turned and jumped off the snake's body. In 2 to 3 steps, I reached the side. The undead spirit snake that had been injured twice was like an arrow at the end of its flight. It wasn't as fast as before. The purple smoke in its mouth wasn't as thick as when it had fought against Nam. When the smoke dissipated, I was no longer at my original position. The undead spirit snake finally reacted. There was a tinge of disappointment in its eyes. However, it could only fight with its life on the line. The huge snake's head turned around again. This time, it didn't spit out any smoke. I had already seen through it. Even though the undead spirit snake's poison was powerful, it wasn't a method that could be used casually. There was a large amount of monster energy within it. If I wanted to use it, I would need to gather it for a period of time. The snake's attack wasn't as ferocious as before. Seeing this, I didn't intend to dodge. Instead, I tilted my body and leaped high into the air. My eyes locked onto the spot 7 inches from the undead spirit snake's back. Primer's leg bone and body descended at the same time and struck that spot. This fatal strike caused the undead spirit snake to instantly lose the ability to resist. The huge snake's head heavily smashed onto the ground, creating echoes in the spacious cave. Under the heavy strike of Primer's leg bone, the undead spirit snake's weak spot turned into a lump of rotten meat, just like the snake's tail. The 10-meter-long scarlet undead spirit snake had been split into 3 parts by the long bone. Each part was struggling, but there was no connection between them. It looked like an earthworm that had been severed. At this moment, the undead spirit snake's body was no longer hot. Its eyes had returned to their original green color, but its eyes were filled with despair. It turned its head and looked at me before slowly closing its eyes, as though waiting for me to give it the final blow. Its current appearance didn't evoke any pity from me. Immediately, Primer's leg bone was raised above his head, and in the next second, it landed heavily on the snake's head. After that, the sound of bones breaking echoed in the cave. The snake's head spurted out cold blood. This continued for a full 10 seconds before it stopped. Seeing that the undead spirit snake was no longer breathing, I turned around and walked towards Nam, who wasn't far away. Luckily, he didn't lose his bag, and the pills that the village chief had given him before he left were still in it. After searching for a while, I found a bottle of antidote pills. After feeding it to Nam, I turned around and fed it to the rabbit tribe girl. Perhaps it was due to the strength of his meridians, but the speed at which he absorbed the pills was much faster. In less than half a minute, Nam shook his head and stood up. Seeing that the surroundings were dark and that he was lying on the ground, his eyes were filled with confusion. He quickly asked me, "Duo-ji, what happened to me? Where am I?" As he spoke, Nam looked around and quickly saw the corpse of the undead snake not far away. Seeing this, he immediately shouted, "Obi! I remember now, I was poisoned by the undead spirit snake's poison." He naturally didn't know what had happened after Nam fainted, so I told him what had happened. After hearing that I had killed the undead spirit snake, Nam scratched his head with an awkward expression. I was too careless. Otherwise, the person who killed it would have been me. I didn't mind Nam's eloquence and just smiled as I looked at the rabbit tribe girl beside me. Currently, her eyes had already opened slightly. Just like Nam, her eyes were filled with confusion, as if she didn't know where she was. Seeing that there was another person beside him, and that it was a girl from another tribe, Nam instantly became much more spirited. He stared at the rabbit tribe girl and whispered into my ear, "This girl is really pretty. Was she also brought here by the undead spirit snake?" Nam was right. Although the rabbit tribe girl was also a half-beast human, her face was closer to a human's except for the 2 long ears on the top of her head. Not only did she not look out of place, she even added a bit of exotic charm to her. Even with my eyes, she was quite stunning. After asking that question, Nam didn't wait for my reply and just squatted in front of the girl and asked softly, "Girl, are you from the Red Soil Village?" The girl's expression was a little sluggish. After hearing Nam's question, she didn't immediately reply, but instead continuously looked at her surroundings. After a few seconds, she seemed to have recovered her senses and suddenly stood up to look around. Very quickly, her gaze locked onto a skeleton behind the undead spirit snake. Her pink eyes were instantly covered with a thin layer of mist. Her chin trembled for a moment before she suddenly let out a sharp cry. It was obvious that she was in extreme pain. Previously, I had guessed that the person that was eaten by the little snakes was from the same tribe as this girl. The current situation had obviously confirmed my guess. Chapter 9:21. Seeing that the girl was so sad, Nam's face flashed with heartache. He immediately asked me, "Duo G, this girl is so pitiful. The disgusting thing on the ground seems to be a person. What's the relationship between this girl and him?" I didn't know much more than Nam about the girl's identity, so I couldn't get an answer from him. Nam stood at the side and rubbed his hands for a long time. He didn't know how to console her. After a long time, seeing that the girl hadn't recovered from her sadness, Nam shifted his gaze to the undead spirit snake and said, "A monster in the monster realm. It must have condensed a beast core. This is a good item. It would be a waste to not take it." After saying that, he walked in front of the undead spirit snake. The monster aura around his body surged and sharp claws appeared in his hands. He cut open the undead spirit snake's stomach in a few swipes. After a few seconds, he took out a beast core that was the size of a fingernail from the snake's stomach. After he carefully wiped off the bloodstains on the beast core, I could finally see the quality of the beast core. The shape of the beast core wasn't uniform and there were different patterns on it. According to what Nam had said, a beast core of this quality wouldn't make the grade. Even so, Nam's face was still full of smiles. He held the beast core in his hand and waved at me. "Duo G, this beast core is still alright. When we reach Rock City, we can exchange it for a gold coin." While Nam was happily talking, the rabbit race girl behind him stood up with the skeleton in her arms. She picked up the tree roots on the ground and tied the corpse to her body before crawling towards the entrance of the cave. Seeing the girl's actions, Nam hastily lifted his leg to follow her. I frowned and stopped Nam, reminding him that they had already wasted a lot of time today, and that they had to hurry on with their journey. Seeing that I was urging him, Nam casually put the beast core into his cloth bag and said, "It's all right. The village chief has already calculated that there are still 10 days until the Saad Academy's selection. Even if we are delayed for a few days, we can still make it." After saying that, the anxious fellow followed the rabbit race girl out of the tree hole. I could only follow helplessly. When she arrived outside the cave, the rabbit woman stopped and put down the corpse on her body. She stared straight at the tree in front of her, thinking about something. Seeing the situation, Nam frowned and explained to me in a low voice, "I heard from the village chief that the rabbit tribe has a custom. When their tribe members die, they put their corpses on a tall tree. It means that their souls will go to heaven and forever protect their tribe. However, the people of the rabbit race are not good at climbing trees. Every time they place the corpses, they have to tie a very long rope to the tree before they can climb up." After listening to Nam's explanation, the rabbit race's burial method was somewhat similar to the human world's sky burial. However, the lowest branch of this tree was at least 10 meters tall, and there were no other tools beside it, so it was very difficult to climb up. At this time, Nam walked in front of the rabbit woman and said softly, "We kobolds have sharp claws, so it's very easy for us to climb trees. Let me help you." The rabbit woman seemed to have an instinctive resistance towards strangers. After hearing Nam's words, she didn't pay attention to him. However, seeing that the tree was really too tall, she couldn't reach it with the tree roots she had picked up. Helpless, she could only nod her head. After getting the woman's consent, Nam took off his shirt and used the tree roots in the woman's hand to tie the corpse to his back. Afterwards, his hands turned into sharp claws, and he leaped up and firmly latched onto the tree trunk. Using all 4 limbs, it didn't take long for Nam to climb up the tree branch and firmly place the corpse on top. After finishing, he didn't immediately come down, but instead lowered his head and asked the woman, "Miss, do you think this place is okay?" Seeing the woman nod her head, Nam chuckled and quickly retreated. After Nam landed, the woman squatted on the ground and stared at the corpse on the tree branch. She let out a GGG sound as if she was praying. After she finished praying, Nam put on his shirt again and walked over to introduce himself in a low voice. "I'm Nam, he's Duo G. We're from Green Water Village, and we're planning to participate in Thad Academy's selection. Miss, what's your name? Your Red Soil Village is quite far from here. What are you doing here?" Nam couldn't see her cultivation level, but I could feel that her strength was at the early stage of the monster spirit realm. Since she was hurrying from here, she was most likely going to participate in the selection. The woman's eyes were evasive and she didn't answer Nam's question. Instead, she hurriedly walked towards the north side of the forest, which was the direction towards Rock City. At that moment, Nam seemed to have realized the woman's destination. He said to me while carrying his cloth bag, "Duo G, could this lady be going to participate in Thad Academy's selection? If that's the case, then we can go together. It won't be boring on the road." Seeing me nod, Nam laughed and chased after her. He shouted, "Miss, wait for us. We'll go to Thad Academy together." The rabbit tribe's speed was already very fast. After the woman heard Nam's shout, she quickened her pace and disappeared in an instant. Seeing this, I shook my head and chased after Nam. I joked, "Have you fallen in love with someone else? Don't forget that you still have 6 women waiting for you at home. Furthermore, they don't even want to talk to you." After hearing what I said, Nam's expression immediately became solemn. He patted my shoulder and replied, "Duo G, you don't understand. No matter how many women you get in the wife selection, you can only say that your skills aren't bad. Only by marrying a woman from another tribe can you be considered as truly capable." What he said wasn't wrong. Under the monster race's social system, it really wasn't suitable to talk about loyalty and chastity. I shook my head and didn't say anything else. Nam chuckled, "Duo G, you don't know that the rabbit tribe is very timid. They usually don't interact with other tribes. Looking at this lady's attire, she must be from a rich family. If I can marry her, then I, Nam, will have a lot of face. At that time, I'll also introduce a few rabbit tribe ladies to you." After saying that, Nam was ecstatic. It seemed that he was already fantasizing about the scene of him marrying the rabbit tribe lady. We joked around as we hurried on our journey. As we walked, the surroundings started to brighten up. It seemed that it was going to be dawn soon. After about half an hour, white smoke suddenly appeared in our surroundings. Under the effects of the smoke, visibility was greatly reduced. Nam didn't seem to take it to heart as he continued on his journey. However, I furrowed my eyebrows and started to investigate the situation of the smoke. We were in a deep and dense forest. At first glance, it seemed normal for the smoke to appear at dawn. However, there was a faint and strange smell in the smoke, which made me cautious. The cross forest was a place where poisonous insects, birds, and beasts roamed. I couldn't be careless if there was any abnormal phenomenon. I opened my mouth to warn Nam to stop in his tracks, lie down, and cover his mouth and nose. Seeing that I was so serious, Nam's eyes were filled with doubt. However, out of trust, he still followed my instructions and buried his head in the bushes. Very quickly, the effects of the poison started to show. Nam's breathing quickened as he lay on the ground, gasping for air. I quickly took out the antidote from his cloth bag. After the two of us took it, our bodies quickly recovered. Luckily, the poison wasn't too ferocious. After taking the medicine, the poison in the air couldn't affect us anymore. After getting up, Nam wiped the sweat off his face and rejoiced. "It's lucky that you're quick-witted. Otherwise, I would have forgotten about the medicine that the village chief gave me." Just as he said that, he suddenly thought of something and shouted, "Oh no, that rabbit race girl is walking in front of us. She doesn't have anything on her, she must have been poisoned." After saying that, Nam quickly ran forward. After running for a quarter of an hour, he finally found the rabbit race girl in the bushes. At that moment, the rabbit race girl's face was turning green and purple. Her breath was extremely weak. If he was any later, her life might be in danger. Nam was extremely anxious as he quickly took out the medicine and fed it to the girl. After a quarter of an hour, the girl's expression eased up and her breath gradually calmed down. However, she was deeply poisoned and wouldn't wake up for a while. Since we couldn't stay here for long, I gestured for Nam to carry her and leave the cross forest first. Luckily, under the cover of the poison, the rest of the journey was extremely peaceful. When we successfully left the cross forest, the sky was already completely bright. The girl's complexion also returned to normal, and she reacted not long after. After slowly waking up, the rabbit race girl's eyes were a little dazed. After a while, she revealed a panicked expression. Seeing that, Nam quickly went over and carefully explained what had happened. Then, he softly said, "Don't be afraid, we saved you." After listening to what had happened, the panic in the rabbit race girl's eyes lessened a little. However, she still didn't talk to Nam. However, when Nam suggested to travel together again, she didn't refuse, making Nam rather happy. Although we didn't rest for a night, the three of us didn't mind since we all had cultivations. After resting for a while, we continued our journey. For the rest of the journey, Nam constantly leaned in front of the rabbit tribe girl and boasted about his heroic deeds. Although the girl's expression was still timid, she gradually lost her previous resistance and chatted with Nam from time to time. According to her, her name was Tana and she was from the red soil village that Nam mentioned. The person that was eaten by the undead snake was her brother. The two of them had depended on each other since they were young and they were going to participate in the selection of Thad Academy. However, they had never traveled far and didn't know the dangers of the journey. Not long after entering the cross forest, they encountered the undead snake. Chapter 9:22. The rabbit girl's sorrowful gaze broke young Nam's heart. He quickly went forward and carefully comforted her. Tana wasn't as weak as she looked. She lowered her head and wiped away her tears. She quickly calmed down and started to chat with Nam about other topics. Nam enjoyed chatting with Tana along the way. Even though the journey was difficult, he didn't complain. One day we arrived at a valley. It was already dusk and the valley was quite spacious. It was a good place to rest. According to the map that the village chief gave us, this place was called Sunset Valley. From the name, it seemed that the scenery was pretty good when the sun set. After hearing my speculation, Nam immediately put down the cloth bag on his back and pulled Tana to the other side of the valley. He said that he wanted to watch the sunset together. After a few days together, the two of them became more familiar with each other. This was Nam's fate. I didn't want to disturb them, so I stayed behind to set up the camp. After nightfall, the two of them returned. I had already set up the camp and gathered a lot of wild fruit. After barely filling their stomachs, Nam and Tana were very tired and quickly fell asleep. My body was much stronger than theirs, so I naturally wasn't tired. I sat cross-legged on the ground and closed my eyes to rest. While cultivating, I spread out my spiritual sense to detect the movements in the surroundings. Although this place was spacious, it was still in the wilderness. I didn't dare to be careless. Cultivating instead of resting was something I had gotten used to over the years, so I didn't feel tired. However, at dawn, I suddenly heard a rustling sound. The sudden turn of events made me immediately stop repairing my acupuncture point. After carefully investigating, I realized that the sound came from under Tana. Not only was there a sound, but the ground under her was also shaking. There was a strange aura coming from the soil, as though something was about to break out of the ground. I frowned and was about to go over to check, but the soil under Tana suddenly caved in and she disappeared. The sudden noise woke Nam up from his sleep. He rubbed his sleepy eyes and asked me in a daze, Duo-ji, why is there thunder? Is it going to rain? I didn't have time to answer him. I jumped in front of the hole and looked down. The hole was only 1 meter wide and 3 meters deep, but Tana was nowhere to be seen. There were 2 auras left at the entrance of the cave. One belonged to Tana and the other was very fishy. Obviously, it was left by some kind of orc. Since I couldn't see the whole cave from above, I jumped in and looked around. Soon, I found some clues. There was a hole on one side of the cave wall. It was about the same size as the entrance of the underground cave, and could only fit one person at a time. Although the entrance was small, the hole was extremely long and narrow. One could not see the end of it at a glance, and no one knew where it led to. As I was sizing it up, Nam's shout came from above my head. After I replied, Nam also jumped in and asked me anxiously, Duo-ji, why are you digging a hole? Have you seen Tana? I told Nam about what had happened earlier. Then, I asked him to carefully analyze the remaining aura in this area to see if he could find any clues. When Nam heard that something happened to Tana, he was shocked. He quickly moved closer and sniffed carefully. After a while, he found something. They can dig holes, and the smell is very pungent. Could it be someone from the rat tribe? Rat tribe? An image of a rat popped up in my head, but I was very confused. Along the way, we hadn't interacted with anyone from the rat tribe. We hadn't even seen them before. Could it be that Tana's enemy had come to pick a fight? I didn't have time to think clearly. Nam was very anxious and urged me to quickly enter the cave to chase after Tana. I nodded. No matter what, we were traveling together. Even if I didn't consider Nam's thoughts, we couldn't just watch a weak girl get into trouble in front of us. I jumped out of the cave first and packed my belongings. Then, I called Nam and we entered the cave one after the other. The cave was very low, so I had to lower my head and crouch to walk. As for Nam behind me, his body was thicker than mine. The moment he entered, he couldn't help but pant. After we hurriedly walked for about half an hour, the monster energy in the cave became thicker. I became vigilant. The exit was most likely in front of us. I turned around and told Nam what to do. He quickly took a few deep breaths to adjust his condition. He took out Primer's long bone from the cloth bag on his back, ready to use it at any time. Soon, there was a faint light in front of us. Nam and I couldn't help but increase our speed. We quickly arrived at the light. It really was the exit. After I spread out my spiritual sense to make sure there was no one around, I leaped out of the cave. Nam followed closely behind me. Because the air in the cave was thin, Nam and I had been holding our breath. After we exited the cave, we subconsciously opened our mouths to pant. However, we didn't expect the smell outside the cave to be even more disgusting. A damp stench entered our nostrils and mouth. Nam and I retched at the same time. I was slightly better as I immediately closed my mouth and nose after smelling the stench. However, Nam took in a huge breath. After retching, he coughed for half a day before he finally came back to life. As we were in a dangerous place, I didn't have the time to turn around to look at Nam. After I calmed down, I looked around. I quickly realized that we were still in a cave. However, this cave was extremely wide. It was several times bigger than the tree hole in the forest. At the top of the cave, there was an ancient tree that reached the sky. This place seemed to be hidden. Even though it was daytime, there was only a weak ray of light. The ancient tree that reached the sky was covered with dark green vines. These vines extended all the way to the bottom of the cave. The surface of the vines was smooth, and almost all of the skin had fallen off. It was obvious that there were signs of activity from a certain race. After Nam observed the surroundings, he was certain that this was the nest of the rat tribe. However, the strange thing was that the cave was strangely quiet. There wasn't a single rat tribe member in the surroundings. After asking Nam, he told me that the rat tribe members were naturally cowardly and cunning. They were experts in burrowing and stealing. They wouldn't show themselves during the day. They would only come out at night. Since it was daybreak, it was possible that the rat tribe members were hiding. However, since we followed them into the cave, it wasn't too long before we were discovered. Moreover, if we wanted to find Tana, we would have to clash with the rat tribe. Thus, I didn't hurry to search for her. Instead, I asked Nam about the cultivation of the rat tribe members. After asking, Nam shook his head. The rat tribe members rarely interact with the outside world. He's the same as me. We don't know anything about the rat tribe. I couldn't figure out their cultivation, but I couldn't leave Tana to save her. Feeling helpless, I could only bring Nam to continue exploring. I tried to be as careful as possible to avoid alerting the enemy. However, after walking for a while, I discovered that there were hundreds of large and small caves in front of me. Each cave was extremely deep and dark. There wasn't a single ray of light that seeped through. I didn't know which path to take. I tried to find Tana's aura, but the ancient aura in this place was very dense. In addition to the stench in the surroundings, it was hard to distinguish her aura. Feeling helpless, I could only tell Nam to be careful while I released my spiritual sense to search through the countless caves in front of me. In this kind of environment, spiritual sense was surprisingly useful. After exploring a few caves, I quickly felt a weak aura of Tana in the depths of a relatively large cave. After making this discovery, I hastily called Nam and carefully walked along the cave. Not long after entering, Tana's aura became denser. At the same time, there were a dozen other auras. These auras were very chaotic. Some of them had low cultivation, while others didn't have any cultivation at all. Apart from these people, there were two other auras that were slightly denser. They should be at the early stage of monster. One of them was naturally Tana, while the other one should be from the rat race. However, even though the rat race's aura wasn't strong, they were able to secretly kidnap Tana, who was also at the early stage of monster, under the cover of my spiritual sense. I didn't dare to be careless. After walking for a quarter of an hour, Tana's aura became denser. I could faintly hear a sharp voice. Even though you're all lower-class commoners, you're still pretty. When the time comes, I'll gift you to Lord Kratos and I'll definitely get a lot of gold coins. When I get the gold coins, I'll leave this broken place and buy a few houses in Rock City. I'll marry 3 to 5 beautiful wives. After saying that, the person let out a gg laughter. Nam, who was following behind me, muttered, "Lord Kratos? I think I've heard of this person before." After thinking for a few seconds, he suddenly remembered. He immediately lowered his voice and said to me, "Duo G, I remember now. Uncle Chu Wang once told me that this Lord Kratos opened the biggest brothel in Rock City. It was said that many nobles would go there to play." Brothel. If that was the case, then the rat race wanted to sell Tana and the others to Rock City as prostitute. After realizing this, Nam was enraged. He squeezed past me and hurried to rescue them. I thought for a moment and didn't extend my hand to stop him. There weren't any other movements in the surroundings. With my cultivation, even if this rat race person wasn't ordinary, I should be able to deal with him easily. Nam quickly disappeared in front of me. I also quickly chased after him. Before I could catch up to Nam, I heard an exclamation in front of me, followed by a scolding. "Why did a dog-headed person like you come here?" Hearing that Nam had been discovered, I quickened my pace and ran towards the source of the voice. Before I arrived, another stench assailed my nose. This stench was even more disgusting than the one outside the cave. I closed my mouth and nose. After turning a corner, the area in front of me suddenly opened up. In a cave that wasn't too big, there were a dozen women of different races tied up on the ground. They were all unconscious, including Tana. In front of everyone stood a rat race member. He wasn't more than half a meter tall, and his tattered clothes gave off a stench. At this moment, he had a relaxed expression and was constantly wagging his slender tail as he looked at us. As for Nam, he was clutching his chest. His eyes were filled with anger. It was obvious that the two of them had exchanged blows and Nam was at a disadvantage. Seeing me enter, the rat race member's expression changed. The relaxed expression on his face disappeared and he screamed, "What are you dog-headed people doing here? Don't you know that this is our rat race's black mud cave?" Chapter 9:23. After realizing that something was wrong, I immediately retracted my gaze and didn't dare to look again. Nam, who was in a fit of rage, didn't seem to realize it as he maintained his attacking stance and charged towards the rat race member. After a short moment, his body suddenly collapsed on the ground as he continuously spat out acid from his mouth. Nam instantly lost his ability to fight, but the rat race member didn't stop. The green color in his eyes became even denser and the sound from his horn became much louder, as though it was going to pierce my eardrums. With my body's toughness, I was naturally able to block it. However, a normal half-beast at the early stage of the monster spirit realm wouldn't be able to block it. With such a technique, it was no wonder that he was able to capture so many women. Nam couldn't take it anymore as he continuously rolled on the ground while covering his ears. There was even blood flowing out from his nose and mouth. I didn't dare to let him continue screaming, so I formed a gust of monster energy in my hand and charged towards that person. When the rat race member saw that his technique was ineffective against me, he was astonished. He hastily retracted his technique and retreated a few meters in an attempt to use the soul-absorbing green light again. I naturally wouldn't give him the chance to do so. I increased the strength in my legs and in a flash, I appeared in front of him and struck his body with my palm. Even though my current cultivation wasn't high, I was still at the middle stage of the monster spirit realm. After that strike, the rat race member instantly spat out a mouthful of blood and his expression became even more panicked. However, when I wanted to deal with him, he suddenly pointed his mouth and spat out a puddle of black water at me. The black water was extremely stinky. I didn't know what it was, but just from the smell, I knew that it wasn't anything good, so I hastily retreated. After I landed on the ground, the black water landed on the spot where I was previously standing, causing the ground to sizzle. It was obvious that the water was extremely corrosive. While I was still paying attention to the black water, there was a sudden explosion from my side. I turned to look and saw that there was a large hole where the women had been. The rat race member and the women had instantly disappeared into the hole. I naturally wouldn't give up, but just as I was about to chase after them, I felt that the monster energy in the surroundings had become much more active. I reckoned that the previous commotion had awakened the other rat race members in the cave. Even though they were naturally cowardly, we were currently in the rat race's nest. If we were trapped, we wouldn't have a good ending. After hesitating for a while, I finally stopped and carried Nam, who had fainted, before turning to leave the cave. When I arrived at the cave we had come from, the Rat Clan's people had already drilled out of the cave. As soon as they saw us, they swarmed toward us and surrounded us. I didn't dare to stay any longer and immediately retreated back to the initial hole. I casually jumped up and returned to the surface. After I placed Nam on the ground, I immediately found a huge rock from the side and blocked the hole. At this time, it was already noon. Presumably, the rat tribe people were not used to moving out during the day. After the cave entrance was sealed, there was no more movement. After that, I had to sit with him. Nam had that I had with him, had to do to wake him. After that he had it, he and to wake and to he had was. After, he had, he to but of to see. To he to. Nam he to. T, after, he to say he to. He. Nam, after listening to my explanation of the situation, he wanted to get up and return to the hole. I hastily stopped him and advised him, "We can't be reckless. We have already alerted them. The rat race will definitely be on guard. If we go back now, it's unlikely that we'll be able to save Tana. Hearing what I said, Nam's face showed his annoyance. After a moment of silence, he asked, Then, are we just going to ignore Tana? Of course, we had to, but we didn't necessarily have to save her from the rat race. I pondered for a moment. Previously, I had heard from the rat race that they wanted to sell Tana to Kratos in Rock City. This meant that, apart from being unable to move, Tana wouldn't be in any danger. Rather than confronting the rat race here, it would be better for us to speed up and reach Rock City first to save Tana. After listening to my plan, Nam's face showed that he was in deep thought. After a moment, he finally nodded. There's less than 3 days' journey from here to Rock City. Let's set off now. After he said that, he patted the filth off his body and anxiously headed towards Rock City. The rest of the journey was rather smooth. Under Nam's incessant urging, we only used 2 days to reach the outskirts of Rock City, which was supposed to take 3 days. It was currently dusk and there weren't many people on the road to Rock City. However, as we neared the city gate, there were more people in front of us. They were all heading towards the city gate. Nam and I quickly joined the group that was entering the city. The surrounding half-beast men, who originally seemed to be in a hurry, looked at us strangely when they saw us. Nam was obviously used to such a situation. He moved closer to my ear and softly explained, Many of us hound headmen are slaves in Rock City. The other races don't really think highly of us. Even though his tone was relaxed, Nam's emotions were obviously shaken. He didn't have the confidence that he had before. He followed closely behind me and subconsciously looked around. At this moment, there was already a long queue at the city gate. There were a few soldiers that looked similar to the hound headmen standing at the entrance. They were checking the bodies of the people entering the city. They looked lazy. I was a little curious. Just as I was about to ask Nam, there was a sudden roar in front of us. A lowly commoner like you wants to enter the city? Is this a place that you can enter? Go back home obediently. As soon as he said that, there was a whimpering dog barking. I looked up and saw a pale hound head man in tattered clothes lying on the ground. At this moment, he was being stepped on by a few burly soldiers, who were insulting and beating him up. After a short while, the hound head man's body was covered in bruises. Looking at this scene, Nam clenched his fist and scolded softly. Obi, these hyenas are too cruel. So they were hyena men. No wonder they looked similar to hound head men. Seeing his own kind being humiliated, although Nam was angry, he stood on the spot and didn't have the courage to step forward to fight for justice. It was obvious that he was used to such situations. After a long while, when the hyena guards stopped beating him up and the injured hound head man left, Nam heaved a sigh of relief. He clenched his teeth and said angrily, I must get into Sade Academy so that they won't dare to bully us hound head men anymore. I patted Nam's shoulder comfortingly. Without saying a word, I brought him to the end of the queue to enter the city. The queue entered the city gate and it was soon our turn. However, when the hyena men soldiers saw Nam and me, they extended their hands to stop us. Their eyes were filled with disdain. They didn't scold or beat us, but waved their hands and said impatiently, Hound headmen again. Go back. Without a master to lead you, you servants can't enter and leave Rock City as you please. After saying that, they ignored us and went to greet the people at the back. Nam panted heavily again, but I didn't care. I walked to the front of the hyena men and said with a smile, Big brother, we are students going to participate in Sade Academy's selection and not servants. Please allow us to pass. After hearing what I said, the hyena man soldier was surprised. He clicked his tongue and said, Yo, I didn't expect that there would be people from your hound head men participating in Sade Academy's selection. Hearing his question, Nam finally gained some courage and interrupted, Our Green Water Village is also under the jurisdiction of Rock City. Both of us have demon cultivation, so of course we have the right to participate in the selection. Nam's words were filled with anger. The hyena man soldier's face instantly darkened and he smiled coldly at Nam. Demon cultivation? Hee hee, as long as I don't let you in, you don't have the right. Just scram back to your green water village. After saying that, he waved his hand to chase us away. Even though the hyena man was rude and unreasonable, his words weren't without reason. If we couldn't enter the city, we naturally wouldn't be able to participate in the selection. I extended my hand to stop the furious Nam. It wasn't a wise move to start a conflict with the guards. Even though their cultivation wasn't high, if they provoked the other soldiers in the city, it wouldn't be easy for us to escape, let alone enter the city. For the current situation, we had to think of another way. Since fists couldn't open a path, we could only use money to buy one. I extended my hand for Nam to take out the money pouch. Seeing that I was asking for the money pouch, Nam wasn't stupid and instantly understood what I meant. He widened his eyes and shook his head. Duo-ji, that won't do. This is the money that the village chief got from selling the herbs. We can't give it to them. Even though he was reluctant, after a short stalemate, he had no choice but to compromise. Clenching his teeth, he took out the money pouch from the cloth bag and passed it to me. After receiving the money pouch, I returned to the hyena man soldier's side. Ignoring the impatience in his eyes, I directly passed the money pouch to him. Looking at the gold coins in the cloth bag, the hyena man soldier instantly put away his impatience. He weighed the money pouch in his hand and revealed a satisfied smile. He pretended to cough a few times before saying, "That's right. Since you are here to participate in the selection of Thad Academy, then go in. But remember, Rock City isn't your green water village. After entering the city, you must follow the rules." Chapter 924. After successfully entering the city, Nam and I finally saw what the monster race's city looked like. There was a wide stone road in front of us. We couldn't see the end of it and we didn't know where it led to. Both sides of the road were filled with large and small stalls with a dazzling array of goods. Beastmen of different races came and went. Occasionally, they would stop at a stall to choose the items that they liked. These items were very common in the human world, and some of them had already been eliminated. However, all of this was extremely novel in Nam's eyes. Nam wasn't as angry as before. He stood next to me and sighed. "Is this Rock City? It really is as prosperous as what the village chief said." Compared to Nam's excitement, I was extremely calm. After looking for a while, I retracted my gaze and urged him to hurry up. Nam nodded dumbly and stared at the surrounding shops as he slowly followed behind me. Occasionally, he would let out a cry of surprise when he saw something new. No matter where it was, country people always acted like this when they entered the city. The surrounding people were already used to it and didn't mind Nam's loud voice. After walking for 100 meters, there were tall buildings made of stones on both sides of the road. These buildings were only a dozen meters tall. The walls weren't carefully polished and looked very rough. Seeing these stone buildings, Nam couldn't remain calm. He pulled me while pointing at the stone buildings. His eyes lit up and said, "These buildings are much sturdier than the thatched houses in our village. Furthermore, they are so spacious. Quite a number of people can live here. When I have money in the future, I want to build a house like this too. I'll be able to sleep in a different room every day." After I said that, I saw the originally leisurely passers-by suddenly run towards both sides of the road as though they were hiding from something. In the midst of the hurried exclamations, a girl shouted, "Scram!" The voice clearly came from afar, but it sounded as though it was right next to my ear. When I turned around to see what was going on, the roar of a ferocious beast was suddenly heard. The surrounding passers-by instantly jumped up and down in panic. I quickly pulled Nam to the side of the road. Only then did I see a cat race girl with 2 pointy ears on her head. She was riding on a ferocious beast that looked like a fierce horse and was running towards us. The cat girl waved the golden whip in her hand. Every time she waved it, there would be a dragon's roar. Many passers-by who couldn't dodge in time were whipped several meters away by the whip in her hand. In an instant, flesh and blood splattered everywhere, leaving a deep mark on the ground. Before we could see her face clearly, she flashed past us. After the horse galloped, a strong gust of wind blew the long hair on Nam's head into his mouth. Nam spat out a mouthful of saliva and took out the hair. Then, he looked in the direction that the woman had gone and cursed in a low voice with a trace of anger. "What kind of person is that? She's running amok in the street." Looking at the woman's attire and unusual mount, she was probably the daughter of some noble family in Rock City. However, I was more curious about the golden whip in her hand. When she waved it, it emitted a dragon roar. I guessed it was some kind of magical tool. This reminded me of the spirit snake. I wondered where he and Tong Tong were and if they were safe. Seeing me in a daze, Nam waved his hand in front of my eyes and asked me what I was looking at. After being interrupted by Nam, I didn't think much about it. I shook my head and asked him if he knew where Lord Kratos' brothel was located in the city. Although Nam had heard of the brothel, he didn't know the exact location. Thus, we walked in front of a shop and tried to ask around. The owner of the shop was a pig-headed person. I had previously heard from Nam that among the half-beast men, although the pig-headed people were a lower race, they were good at doing business. Overall, they were relatively wealthy. Their status in the monster region was much higher than the dog-headed people. When the pig-headed owner saw us walk over, he immediately picked up the items on his stall and handed them over. With a smile, he said, "You guys came from outside the city, right? Take a look at the items here. The villages outside the city don't have anything like this." This pig-headed boss was able to tell where we came from with just a glance. This made Nam very surprised and he said, "Boss, how did you know we came from outside the city?" The owner tidied up the messy goods in front of him and said unhurriedly, "In this rock city, most of the dog-headed people have become slaves for the rich families. Since you guys are so leisurely and don't have slave marks on your faces, you must have just come from outside the city." The peddlers of Rock City interacted with a lot of people every day, so they had good eyesight. Nam seemed to want to say something, but the owner beat him to it. He passed the goods in front of us and said, "I have good goods here. Do you want to buy some?" Seeing the owner's enthusiasm, Nam scratched his head and said, "I'm sorry, we don't have any money. We just want to ask for directions. Do you know how to get to Lord Kratos' brothel?" After hearing that, the owner's face instantly darkened. He waved his hand at us and said, "Let's go. Don't block my business. You don't have money and you still want to go to the brothel? You're crazy." The sudden change in the owner's attitude stunned Nam. He looked at me as though he was asking me what we should do next. I didn't reply and pulled him towards another shop. However, when every shop owner heard that we didn't have money and only wanted to ask for directions, they chased us away with a face of disgust. Seeing that the sky was about to turn completely dark and we still hadn't found Lord Kratos' brothel, Nam became even more anxious and asked me, "Duo-G, you have a lot of ideas. What do you think we should do now?" Dog-headed people were lower-class citizens. Their status in Rock City was even lower. No one would even look at them in the eye. However, in order to enter the city, we gave all the gold we had to the hyena soldiers. We didn't even have a place to stay tonight. It would be difficult to ask the passers-by for directions. That's why we need to get some gold first. Hearing me say that, Nam's expression became even more serious. He complained, "It's so late at night, where are we going to get money?" "You can't say it like that. It's because it's late at night that we can get money quickly." Nam saw the smile on my face and seemed to know that I already had a plan. He quickly asked, "Duo-G, did you already think of a plan?" I didn't reply to him and asked him to follow me to the restaurant in the distance. After walking for less than 100 meters, Nam called out to me from behind, "Duo-ji, look, there's a person lying there." Hearing Nam's shout, I stopped and looked in the direction he pointed. There was indeed a person lying in an alley to my side. That person's hair was unkempt and his face was covered in filth. I couldn't see his face clearly. Other than that, there were many scars on the exposed parts of his body. The wounds were already rotten, and there were many mosquitoes crawling on them, gnawing on the rotten flesh. He didn't seem to have the strength to get up and chase the mosquitoes away. He could only lie on the ground and groan softly. Even in the human world, there were many people with such a hard life, not to mention the monster region where the strong preyed on the weak. I didn't intend to pay attention to this kind of person. It could be said that a pitiful person must have a hateful side. However, Nam didn't leave even after a long time. Maybe he felt pity for that person's pitiful state. I knew that Nam was kind-hearted, but Rock City couldn't be compared to Green Water Village. Sometimes, overflowing kindness would harm oneself. However, I didn't say that to Nam. Of course, he probably wouldn't listen even if I said that. At that moment, Nam had already lifted his feet and walked towards that person. I also followed behind him. After arriving in front of that person, Nam first used his monster energy to chase away the mosquitoes on the wound. Then, he took out the half bottle of black mud cream and slowly applied it on the wound. I then took out a healing pill from the cloth bag and fed it to the person. After finishing, Nam still didn't intend to leave. I knew that he wanted to wait for the person to wake up before leaving, so I didn't urge him. After about 15 minutes, the person on the ground finally slowly opened his eyes. Seeing us sitting at the side, he was shocked. He immediately curled up and moved towards the wall behind him. His eyes were filled with fear. Seeing him like that, I pulled Nam and prepared to leave. However, after Nam took a few steps back, he suddenly said to me, "Duo-ji, this beggar is also from Rock City. He should know where the brothel is." What Nam said wasn't wrong. The people who were most familiar with the streets and alleys of a city were definitely hooligans and beggars. If it was so in the human world, then the monster region wouldn't be any different. Thinking about that, we returned to the person's side. Seeing that I had left and returned, the beggar on the ground shrunk back to the wall. He lowered his head and whimpered, "Please, I beg you, don't hit me." Nam comforted him in a low voice to calm the beggar down. Then, he asked for the location of the brothel from him. After getting the address, Nam didn't want to stay any longer. In less than 15 minutes, we found the right location with me. It was already late at night. The shops along the way had already closed for the day, but the brothel in front of us had just opened its doors to welcome customers. There were constant noises coming from inside. Chapter 9:25. The other buildings in Rock City were luxurious in Nam's eyes, but they weren't even worth mentioning when compared to the brothel in front of him. However, Nam was currently worried about the rabbit girl Tana, so he didn't have the time to care about such things. He lifted his foot and was about to walk in. I hastily extended my hand to stop him. The purpose of this trip was to save Tana, so it would be best if we could wait in the brothel. However, with our current cultivation, not to mention the owner of the brothel, even the snake tribe guards would probably treat us as beggars and throw us out. Thus, it was impossible to enter the brothel. It would be better to wait at the entrance and wait for the rat tribe members to arrive. It would be best if we could save Tana outside the brothel and avoid the entanglement of Kratos. Nam didn't understand why I stopped him. After listening to my explanation, he suddenly understood and sighed. "Duo-ji, you really have a way." Although we were guarding at the entrance of the brothel was located in a bustling area. The entrance was as crowded as a marketplace. Not to mention the fact that the two of us were standing guard here, the rat tribe members who kidnapped Tana probably wouldn't openly bring a group of women in. Generally speaking, such a filthy place like a brothel would have many shady things and people, so they would open a side door. Based on this, when the rat tribe members brought Tana back, they would most likely use the side door. After thinking about this, I pulled Nam to look around the brothel. Nam didn't know what I was thinking and asked me curiously why I was wandering around. After I explained it to him, Nam's face was filled with admiration. He said to me in surprise, "Duoji, you really know a lot. You've been to this kind of place before, right?" I could only shake my head in response to his curiosity. I pushed the blame to my cheap master, and said that I had come here with him a few times before. After Nam heard that, he was instantly envious. While we were chatting, we saw a side door in a small alley on the east side of the brothel. At the entrance, there was a servant unloading goods from a carriage pulled by a ferocious beast. There was a rich fragrance of wine coming from that direction. The goods on the carriage were most likely rare in the monster region. Nam licked his lips. He wasn't greedy for the aroma of the wine. Instead, he said to me happily, "Let's wait here tonight. I hope Tana will arrive soon." I lifted my head and looked around. This side door was located in a remote alley. If we hid here, we wouldn't be discovered easily. However, there was no need to work so hard to keep an eye on us. Opposite the side door of the brothel was an inn. From the window of the inn, we could see the side door. Thus, I pointed at the inn and said to Nam, "Let's go to the inn and rest while we wait for Tana's arrival." When Nam heard this, his eyes widened and he quickly waved his hand. "How can I do that? We've given all our money to the hyena soldiers. How can we afford to stay in a hotel now?" I looked around. If we were in Green Water Village, it wouldn't be easy to earn money. However, in Rock City, especially next to a bustling brothel, it shouldn't be a problem to earn some gold coins. Thus, I smiled at Nam and pointed at the main entrance of the brothel. "Let's go to the main entrance and wait. Who knows, there might be a sucker who will take the initiative to give us money." Nam was stunned for a moment before he understood what I meant. He opened his mouth wide and exclaimed, "Duo-ji, you aren't thinking of robbing us, right?" For Nam, who grew up in Green Water Village, it was hard to imagine something like robbing. However, he wasn't a naive child. After he asked that question, he didn't wait for my reply before he clenched his teeth and continued, "Now that we don't even have the registration fee for Thad Academy, other than robbing them, there doesn't seem to be any other way." I nodded and pointed at the front door of the brothel. "There should be a lot of drunk people coming in and out at night. We should be able to find a fat pig." After I reached a consensus, I brought Nam back to the main entrance of the brothel and waited quietly. It was just as I thought. There were drunk half-beast men coming out of the brothel from time to time. However, most of them were from powerful races. After I weighed the pros and cons, I didn't make a move until a fat pig-headed man appeared. My eyes lit up as I confirmed my target. The pig-headed man's cultivation was only at the initial stage of the monster spirit realm, but he wore luxurious clothes. As he walked, he patted his round belly, causing the gold coins in his pouch to clink. It was obvious that he was a fat sheep. I called out to Nam softly and pointed at the pig-headed man in front of me. Afterwards, I lifted my foot and followed him. Coincidentally, after the pig-headed man left the brothel, he didn't walk towards the main street. Instead, he entered a small alley and started to vomit at the entrance of the alley. Seeing such a good opportunity, I naturally wouldn't miss it. I hastily instructed Nam to stay where he was to observe the situation while I quickly moved forward. I purposely walked lightly, and since the pig-headed man was still vomiting, he naturally didn't notice anything. After I got close to him, I circulated the monster energy in my body and pointed at the back of the pig-headed man's neck. The sound of his vomiting slowed down and he immediately fainted, falling to the ground. I extended my hand and searched around the pig-headed man's waist. I quickly found his money pouch and opened it to take a quick look. There were over 100 gold coins in the pouch. It was enough for Nam and me to pay for the registration fee and daily expenses. After scanning the surroundings and seeing that no one was paying attention, I immediately left and went outside to meet up with Nam. After I had the money, I brought Nam to the main entrance of the inn next to the brothel and prepared to enter the inn. At that moment, there was a chicken man servant standing at the entrance of the inn. He was leaning against a stone pillar and dozing off. It was probably because there weren't many people staying at the inn at night. Nam walked forward and shook him awake. After the chicken man woke up, he wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth. When he saw that we were dog-headed men, his expression became slightly displeased. He waved his hand and said, "Which family servant are you from? What are you doing at the inn instead of sleeping so late at night? Hurry up and leave, don't disturb my sleep." Nam hated people calling him a dog-headed servant the most. He instantly became unhappy and extended his hand to pat the chicken man's comb in an attempt to wake him up. The chicken man felt pain and his eyes widened. He glared at us and said, "Heh, your servant's hands are really strong. If you don't leave, I'll call the hyena patrol team." Hearing him mention hyenas, Nam became even angrier. He pointed at his face and shouted, "Look carefully, we are dog-headed men from outside the city. We are not the servants that you are talking about." That person followed Nam's finger and looked left and right, but he didn't find a servant mark. He then squeezed out a smile and said, I really didn't notice. But do you dog-headed men also need to stay at the inn?" The chicken man's words still sounded like he looked down on us. However, Nam didn't get angry this time. Instead, he proudly took the money pouch from my hand and shook it at the chicken man. Hearing the sound of gold coins clinking in the pouch, the chicken-headed man's face instantly turned into a smile, and he jogged all the way into the shop. The inn was quite spacious. There were a dozen stone tables downstairs with leftover food and wine on the tables that hadn't been cleaned yet. The chicken man ran in front of the counter and knocked on the stone slab to wake up the dozing boss. Hearing that we wanted to stay at the inn, the bearman boss wiped his face and looked at us. He didn't judge people by their appearance like the chicken man. After seeing that we didn't have any marks on our faces, he walked out from behind the counter and greeted us. "The two of you came from outside the city and you are so young. If I'm not wrong, you must be students that are here to participate in Thad Academy's selection." Seeing Nam nod, the boss instantly revealed a smile. "Hey, you've come to the right place." Nam was a little confused and asked, "What do you mean?" The honest bearman boss stroked his beard and pointed at the room upstairs. "Ever since I opened this inn, all the students that have stayed here have been admitted to Thad Academy. Don't you think that you've come to the right place? When I was at the entrance, I released my spiritual sense and found a dozen auras in the inn. They were all at least at the demon level. According to what the boss said, most of the people staying here should be examinees like us. Entering Thad Academy was Nam's biggest dream. Thus, after hearing what the boss said, Nam's eyes instantly lit up. He pulled my arm and said, "Duo-ji will be staying here for the next few days." I didn't really care about this matter and nodded with a smile. Then, I said to the bearman boss, "Prepare a room facing east for us." The inn was located on the east side of the brothel. Based on the room structure, the room facing east would have a window facing west, allowing us to see the brothel's side door. Hearing what I said, the honest bearman boss rubbed his hands and said, "We have a room facing east, but there's only one heaven room left. The price isn't cheap. You should stay in the room facing west. It's only half the price of the heaven room." Seeing that the boss was questioning our financial resources, Nam naturally wouldn't let go of this opportunity to show off. He immediately raised his money pouch and shook it. "Don't worry, boss. We have enough gold coins." Hearing the sound of gold coins, the boss naturally wouldn't turn down money. He called for the chicken man to bring us to the room upstairs. When we reached the heaven room, Nam, who had never seen the world, became excited again. He constantly sighed at the exquisite decorations in the room. I pulled the chicken man over and told him to prepare a meal downstairs and bring it up to us. From Green Water Village to Rock City, Nam and I had been eating wild fruits and dried meat that he always brought with him. Now that we had the conditions, we could let Nam eat some meat. Thus, I specially ordered 2 jugs of wine. Chapter 9:26. Looking down from the window of the inn, I could see the situation at the side door of the brothel. Even the small alley outside the door could be seen clearly. As soon as that rat man appeared, I would notice him immediately. After carefully confirming it, I sat cross-legged by the window. While I cultivated and rested, I used my spiritual sense to cover the entire small alley and paid close attention to everyone who entered and left. Although my cultivation couldn't recover for the time being, it wasn't difficult for me to multitask with my many years of cultivation. For the entire night, I didn't miss a single person who entered and left the small alley. However, the only people that came and went were merchants who were delivering goods. The rat man didn't appear. Thinking about how he brought so many women with him, his speed couldn't be compared to ours. It would most likely take a few more days. It wasn't until the sun rose that Nam finally woke up. He rubbed his heavy head and muttered, "Oh bye, the alcohol last night was too strong." After saying that, he suddenly remembered about Tana. He quickly stood up and asked me, "Duo-ji, did you fall asleep last night? Could it be that when we fell asleep, Tana was already sent to the brothel?" Nam's face paled. He was annoyed and prepared to go downstairs to check on the situation. I quickly pulled him back and said angrily, "Don't worry. You slept like a pig last night. I guarded the window for the entire night. That rat man didn't appear. He brought those women with him, so he couldn't have left that quickly." After hearing what I said, Nam let out a long sigh and patted his chest in relief. After a while, he said to me embarrassedly, "It's all thanks to you, Duo-ji." I waved my hand and didn't mention it again. I called Nam to go downstairs to prepare some food. This fellow had a stomach full of alcohol last night. He had to eat something early to adjust his body. Otherwise, it would most likely affect his entrance exam in a few days. When we went downstairs, the dozen or so stone tables in the inn's hall were almost full. The chicken man waiter was so busy that his feet didn't even touch the ground. When he saw us coming down, he probably remembered the bag of gold coins from last night. He even took the time to greet us enthusiastically. The chicken-headed man's greeting attracted the attention of all the customers in the restaurant. Their gazes all landed on me and Dunham. It was probably because they had never seen a dog-headed man spending money in a restaurant before, as all of their gazes were filled with astonishment. Naturally, I didn't care about their gazes. Dunham was currently hungry, so he didn't care. He looked around and saw that there was only a large stone table in the middle of the hall with some dishes on it. It seemed that the boss had prepared it for us in advance. Nam and I didn't stand on ceremony, we walked over and sat down. The food in Rock City couldn't compare to that of the human race, but compared to the food in Green Water Village, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to compare it to immortal wine. Without waiting for me to open my mouth, Nam, who was ravenous, had already grabbed the food and wolfed it down. As he ate, he cheerfully called out to me, "Duo-ji, these dishes are too delicious. Hurry up and try some." He asked me to taste it, but in fact, before I even touched it, the food had almost been wiped clean by him. After he finished eating, he still looked like he hadn't had enough and shouted for the chicken man waiter to bring more food. The surrounding crowd looked at Nam wolfing down his food and muttered from time to time, "This dog-headed man is really a lowly commoner. Even his table manners are so unsightly. Look at their tattered clothes, yet they can still afford to stay in the heaven room." I really didn't expect it. Most likely because his wallet was full, Nam didn't have the inferiority he had yesterday. He didn't care about the surrounding discussions. Not only did he not restrain himself, He even patted his stomach and purposely let out a burp. The busy chicken-headed man didn't have the time to care about us. At that moment, a rough and deep voice sounded from the door. "Uncle Kyle, where's my wine?" This voice was extremely loud, instantly attracting the attention of the surrounding people to look at the door. Nam and I followed the movements of the crowd and turned to look. A tower-like half-beast man walked in. He had the head of a bear and the body of a human. He was of the same race as the owner of the inn, but his appearance was much more powerful. He was at least 2 meters tall and his shoulders were broad, almost half of his height. He was also wearing armor that clanked as he walked. Hearing the bear man shout, the owner behind the counter lazily put down the account book in his hand and replied snappily, "Aotua, why aren't you serving the mayor this early in the morning? What are you doing here?" The owner's words instantly caused a commotion. I frowned. Serving the mayor? This bear man named Aotua was the mayor's guard? Although I didn't know the cultivation level of the mayor of Rock City, the principal of SAR Academy had a young god, which was the cultivation level of a monster saint. The mayor of Rock City shouldn't be too far off. For this bear man to be the mayor's guard, he should be an influential figure in Rock City. While I was guessing in my heart, Aotua took off his metal helmet and wiped the sweat off his face. "Uncle Kyle, you don't know, but I've been busy preparing for SAR Academy these past few days. I haven't slept for a few days. Since I finally have the time today, I came over for a drink or two." After saying that, he didn't wait for the owner to reply and turned to walk towards the dining room. However, Aotuo's expression darkened when he saw that there weren't any seats. After a few seconds, his gaze fell on our table and he walked over. I frowned and recalled that the table was filled with food. It was highly possible that it wasn't prepared for us, but for the owner of the inn to prepare it for the bear man guard. It was obvious that we had gotten into trouble. The surrounding half-beastmen immediately realized what was going on and started discussing among themselves. "Hee, those 2 dog-headed men are out of luck. I heard that this bear man commander is famous for his bad temper. It won't end well for anyone who offends him." Aotua walked to the table in a few steps and threw his helmet on the table. The loud sound made Nam stagger in fright. His eyes were instantly filled with fear. He wasn't scared out of his wits. He shivered and stood up from the chair. He pulled my arm and wanted to leave. When the bear man commander saw us stand up, he suddenly said coldly, "Stop right there. Did I say that you can leave?" Nam's body instantly froze on the spot. He nervously squeezed out a smile and smiled apologetically at Aotua. "Respectable Commander Aotua, we have already eaten. Staying here will affect your meal." Aotua's expression was still tense, but he ignored Nam's words. Instead, he gestured for us to take a seat. At the same time, he said, "Are you from the countryside? I told you to sit down, so sit down. Stop talking nonsense." As he said that, he threw the axe that was strapped to his waist onto the stone table. The heavy axe wasn't something that the stone table could withstand. After a loud bang, cracks appeared on the stone table. At this moment, Boss Kyle walked over with a jar of wine in his hands. When he saw this scene, he suddenly put down the wine jar and slapped Aotuo's head. He said angrily, "It's so early in the morning. What are you doing? If you break my table, don't even think about drinking." It was obvious that the relationship between uncle and nephew was quite good. Not only was Aotua not angry, he even felt a little awkward. He smiled apologetically and said, "Uncle Kyle, there are so many people watching. It's just a table. Can you at least give me some face?" Only then did Boss Kyle let out a light snort, ignored him, and walked away. After the boss left, Aotua noticed that everyone's gaze was on him. He immediately snorted. The surrounding half-beastmen were so scared that they immediately looked away and buried their heads in their bowls, not daring to make a sound. Aotua then waved his hand and signaled for the chicken head waiter to come over. He took away the empty bowls and replaced them with steaming hot vicious beast meat. After taking a sip from the wine jar, Aoto then looked at Nam and me. He asked indifferently, "Are the two of you here to participate in the selection?" I didn't say anything, but Nam hurriedly nodded. Aotua took another sip of wine and wiped away the wine droplets that flowed down his beard. He continued, "You Houndhead men are really lucky. After so many years, no one has come to participate in the selection. But this year, two of you have come." If these words came from someone else, Nam would definitely retort. However, in front of the commander of the Bearmen, he could only lower his head and not make a sound. Aotoa sighed and continued, "It seems that the city lord's previous decision was correct. Only by threatening to remove your hindrance village can you lazy inferior races feel pressure. However, the two of you have only reached the Academy's registration requirements. It is still unknown whether you will be able to get in. From what I see, you cowardly Houndhead men should all be removed from your village and sent to Rock City to be servants." Even though Nam was cowardly, his eyes reddened when he heard Aotuo's insulting words. He clenched his fist tightly. Even though he didn't make a sound, it was obvious that he was extremely angry. Aotua obviously noticed his change. He chuckled and asked, "What's wrong? Do you think that what I said was wrong?" I frowned at the side. I wanted to help Nam out of his predicament, but after thinking about it, the lowly status of the Houndhead men had always been Nam's burden. If this matter could help him untie the knot in his heart, it would be a good thing. As for the commander of the Bearmen, even though his temper wasn't good, his status wasn't ordinary. He probably wouldn't make things difficult for us lowly Houndhead men. After hearing Aotuo's words, Nam took a deep breath. His voice was still trembling, but he finally opened his mouth. He raised his head to look at Aotua and shook his head. "We Houndhead men are indeed a lowly race, but we definitely aren't lazy. Ever since I could remember, there were a total of 63 people in the younger generation of Greenwater Village. From the age of 3 to 16, they would train with Uncle Chu Wang every day. No matter if it was rainy or windy, none of them would miss training. When I was 16, I was the only one in the entire village who had reached the late stages of Monster Soldier. From then on, the village chief would search for elixirs that could increase my cultivation every day. Even when Uncle Chu Wang was injured, he would hunt ferocious beasts in the mountains to increase my nutrition. Their goal is to protect Greenwater Village, so our Greenwater Village definitely won't be removed." Nam's sudden outburst of words made the Bearman Otto furrow his brows. The surrounding half-beast-men looked at us with schadenfreude. Not only them, even Nam's face was filled with regret and sorrow after he finished speaking. He probably felt that after offending Aotua, it would be hard for him to walk out of this place in one piece. At that moment, Aotuo's expression was extremely cold. It seemed that Nam had angered him. However, after staring at us for a moment, he suddenly laughed. "You Houndhead men seem to be interesting." After saying that, he picked up the wine jar and poured a bowl of wine for Nam. Nam was completely dumbfounded. He sat there blankly with his eyes staring blankly. It was obvious that he didn't know what had happened. Chapter 9:27. Seeing me finish the cup of wine, Aotuo's eyes revealed a trace of admiration, but the words that came out of his mouth were still unpleasant to hear. "Of course you dog-headed people want to protect the village, but with just the two of you, one in the early stage of the demon spirit realm and the other in the middle stage, your bloodline isn't good enough, so I'm afraid it's impossible for you to enter Sod Academy." His words were cruel, but they were the truth. The demon spirit realm was only the starting point for applying to Sod Academy. Only by crossing this line would one have the qualifications to participate. Currently, Dunham only had this qualification, but there was an even more difficult entrance exam waiting for him. With the dog-headed people's talent, It was almost impossible. But what Aotua didn't know was that I wasn't a dog-headed person, and Dunham's talent, with my help during this period of time, wasn't something that a normal dog-headed person could compare to. Of course, I wouldn't say this out loud. As for Dunham, this guy had already made getting into Sod Academy his life goal. With a firm belief, he wasn't lacking in confidence at all. After hearing Aotuo's words, he muttered in a low voice, "I will definitely pass the selection." Aotua obviously heard what he said. He took another sip and squinted his eyes. "You little guy, why are you mumbling like a mosquito? Speak louder." After being yelled at by Aotua, Dunham's body trembled and he said loudly, "I said, I will definitely pass the selection." Hearing Dunham's yell, even with the ferocious Aotua around, the surrounding diners all sneered at the same time. It was obvious that they weren't optimistic about Dunham's future. Bearman Aotua didn't care. After hearing Dunham's bold words, he clapped his bare paws and shouted, "Good, it's rare for a dog-headed person like you to have such ambition." The stone table in front of him already had a few cracks on it, so with the force it instantly collapsed. The food and wine on the table spilled all over the floor. Hearing the noise, Boss Kyle hastily walked out from the backyard. Seeing that the stone table was broken, his eyes instantly widened and he grabbed Aotuo's ear and scolded, "You stinking brat, did you drink too much again? Hurry up and sober up, or else don't ever think of drinking here again." Looking at the broken stones on the floor, Aotua had an awkward expression and could only let Uncle Kyle scold him. After Kyle calmed down, he picked up the helmet on the ground and prepared to leave. However, after a few steps, he turned around and said to us, "Kids, are you interested in seeing the world with me? See the world?" I didn't know what Otto meant, but judging from his expression, it couldn't be anything bad. It was highly likely that it had something to do with the preparation for the election that he just mentioned. Dunham and I didn't know much about Thad Academy's examination, so it was good to get some information in advance. So I made up my mind, called Nam, and followed Otto out of the inn. After we got out of the door, Aotua asked us lazily while fiddling with the giant axe in his hand, "Brat, do you know where I'm taking you?" I had already guessed it, so I casually said it out loud. Hearing this, Aotuo's expression was somewhat startled. "Everyone says that you kobolds are stupid and cowardly, but you're actually quite quick-witted." He then waved his hand and continued, "You dog-headed people have it tough. Let me briefly explain the situation of Thad Academy to you." As we walked, he began to explain the situation of Thad Academy to us. According to him, Thad Academy's annual examination was the most important event in Rock City. In order to expand its influence and encourage the younger generation to cultivate, the examination would be held in different places in the city every year. The final list of candidates would also be announced for 3 days. Since there would be more candidates this year, the mayor decided to set up the venue in the purple bamboo forest in the south of the city. He even built a place for the candidates to rest in. After the examination, all the candidates would move in. Thad Academy was divided into 5 academies: the Medicine Research Institute, the Martial Research Institute, the Cultivation Research Institute, the Research Court, and the Classics Research Institute. Among the 5 academies, the Classics Research Institute was the weakest. Originally, the Classics Research Institute was in charge of punishing students who violated the rules. This year, it had been upgraded to an independent academy. Although the Classics Research Institute wasn't as attractive as the other academies, it had a large number of ancient books of the monster race. It was said that the students who studied in the Classics Research Institute would stay in Thad Academy to teach the other students. In Thad Academy, students who were injured would be sent to the Medicine Research Institute for treatment. Apart from treating injuries, the Medicine Research Institute was also responsible for developing elixirs. Not only would the elixirs be provided to the Academy's staff, but they would also be sold in the market. This was a rule set by the mayor to increase that academy's reputation. Once someone in the Medicine Research Institute developed a new medicine, the mayor would reward them. Compared to the Medicine Research Institute, the Marshall Research Institute had a much more arduous daily task. Not only did they have to create sharp and practical weapons for the market and the Rock City Defense Army, but they also had to train their bodies continuously. Usually, after graduating from the Marshall Research Institute, most people would serve in the City Defense Army. Otto patted his chest and said proudly, "Back then, I was recognized by the Castellan when I was studying in that academy. After graduation, I joined the Castellan's guards and became a commander step by step." Hearing his words, Nam's eyes were filled with envy. A few days ago in Green Water Village, Nam had heard him mention his ambition. He wanted to enter the Demon Emperor's Guard, which was similar to Otto's identity. Otto continued to explain the situation of that academy's branch after that. The Research Institute was the place to compile laws. The students had to study a lot to perfect the laws of Rock City. After graduation, most of them would become the law enforcers of Rock City or the surrounding towns. They were also officials. To some commoners, they didn't have high racial talents, so they would stagnate after cultivating to a certain level. At that time, the Research Institute was the best place to go. Thus, Ao had purposely explained in detail about the academy. From his point of view, the Research Institute was the most suitable place for Dunham and me. Lastly, the Research Institute had the highest status and the largest number of students in that academy. At the same time, it was also the hardest to get into the Academy of Sciences. The students there didn't pay attention to anything else as they only focused on cultivating. Most of the Academy's resources were invested in the Academy of Sciences. If the students of the Research Institute could reach a certain level before graduation, the City Lord of Rock City would send them to Rapid City to continue their studies. They might even have the opportunity to worship the Monster Emperor. After listening to Otto's introduction, Nam and I had a clearer understanding of that academy. Otto continued to introduce the specific stages of the academy. The 5 academies of that academy were separated into low, intermediate, and high levels. The new students would stay in the low level to study. After a year, those who passed the assessment would be able to advance to the intermediate level. Otherwise, they would have to stay in the low level to cultivate until they passed the assessment. As for the high-level assessment, it would only be held once every 3 years. After advancing to the high level for 3 years, there would be a graduation assessment. Only those who passed the assessment would be allowed to graduate. Otherwise, they would be thrown into the mist forest for 3 months as punishment. Among the 5 academies, the Research Institute's assessment was the strictest. In order to graduate, one had to reach the Monster King's realm. As for the other academies, they didn't look at one's cultivation. They only looked at the assessment of specific subject. After the brief introduction, Otto casually asked, "You 2 dog-headed brats, which academy do you want to enter?" Nam wasn't afraid of him anymore. Hearing the question, he replied loudly without thinking, "Of course it's the Research Institute." Otto smiled and didn't say anything to discourage him. Instead, he smiled and said, "This isn't a place that you can enter just because you want to. You have to look at the aptitude assessment at the end. This assessment is a secret in that academy's recruitment. I can't tell you for now. If you 2 brats are lucky enough to make it to the end, then you will know." Chapter 928. We were immersed in Ao2O's narration along the way. Unknowingly, we had already reached the south side of the city. Looking in the direction that Ao2O was pointing at, there was a dense bamboo forest not far from us. Just as Ao2O had said, the area was extremely wide and flat. Every bamboo was at least 10 meters tall. The outer skin of the bamboo was light purple. From afar, it looked like a pretty good scenery. Under his lead, after walking for about a quarter of an hour, they finally saw an open space in the dense bamboo forest that had been cleared. The clearing was about a few hundred square meters. There were dozens of dog-headed people servants busily working on the grass. They moved 1/2 meter of stone slabs from the vicious beast carriage and laid them neatly on the grass. Although these dog-headed people slaves were very strong, under the blazing sun, they were still sweating profusely and gasping for breath. Even so, they didn't dare to stop and wipe the sweat off their faces. If they were even a second slower, they would be whipped by the bearmen soldiers who were supervising them. We didn't know what kind of beast skin the whip was made from, but it would split the skin in 2 to 3 strokes. Sweat would drip onto the wounds, causing the dog-headed people to cry out in pain. In the past, Nam had only heard from the village chief that the dog-headed people were servants in Rock City. As for what happened to the servants, he didn't see it with his own eyes. I don't know if Aotua was purposely trying to disgust us, but the scene in front of us made Nam feel extremely uncomfortable. Luckily, he knew his limit. He clenched his fists and stood at the same spot. After watching for a few seconds, he turned his head away as he couldn't bear to watch anymore. Seeing Nam's expression, Aotuo's face was extremely calm. He said, "Little fellows, if you want to change the fate of your tribe, then work hard. If you are fortunate enough to become a student of Sod Academy and reach the Monster King realm in the future, not only will your village not be removed, but the status of the dog-headed people will also increase. When that time comes, the dog-headed people servants will become history in Rock City." Nam listened to his words and clenched his fists even harder. He had been working hard for this goal all these years and didn't dare to slack off. After Aotua finished speaking, he didn't pay any more attention to us. Instead, he called the surrounding dozen of bearmen soldiers to rest for a while. Before leaving, Aotua gave the kobold servants some time to go easy. After the soldiers left, the servants heaved a sigh of relief and sat on the ground, panting heavily. I patted Nam's shoulder and told him that Otto had purposely created an opportunity for us. If he had anything to say, he should hurry up and say it. After hearing my words, Nam was stunned at first, but he instantly understood what I meant. He hastily wiped the tears off his face and walked towards the dispirited kobold servants. Seeing Nam, who was dressed neatly and had no slave marks on his face, everyone raised their heads and looked at him. Their eyes were filled with curiosity. After walking into the crowd, Nam's footsteps did not stop. Instead, he kept sizing them up as if he was looking for someone familiar. In the next second, a hoarse voice came from a corner. "Nam? Are you Nam?" The wind rustled the bamboo leaves, but it did not cover up the faint sound. After hearing the voice, Nam was stunned on the spot. After a few seconds, he suddenly turned around and looked in the direction of the voice. The person who spoke was around 30 to 40 years old. However, his skin was tanned and his face was filled with wrinkles. He seemed to be even older than the village chief. When Nam turned around, the person confirmed his identity. He stood up shakily and tears streamed down his face. He shouted, "It really is you, little Nam. Little Nam." The person stumbled towards Nam and grabbed his arm. He kept sizing up Nam's body. His eyes were filled with love. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 years have passed. Little Nam has grown so tall. Nam's eyes were filled with tears and his cheeks kept trembling. After hearing that, he could no longer suppress his emotions and threw himself into the person's embrace. He cried, "Uncle Chael, I missed you so much." After all, the reunion of loved ones was quite touching. The dog-headed servants did not show any signs of fear when they were whipped. However, when they saw this scene, they started crying as though they had recalled their memories. Uncle Chael was the first to calm down. He slowly pushed Nam away and wiped the tears off his face. Then, he asked the villagers if they were all right. Uncle Chael said their names and Nam nodded. After knowing that the people he knew were all right, He let out a long sigh and fell into silence. A few seconds later, he suddenly lifted his head and asked Nam why he was here. Nam replied while sobbing, "Duoji and I are here to participate in That Academy's selection." Saying that, Nam looked at me. After hearing Nam's purpose for coming to Rock City, Uncle Chael's face was filled with surprise. He raised his voice, "You're saying that you're here to participate in the selection?" Seeing Nam nod, he took a few steps back and looked Nam up and down again. He clicked his tongue and praised, "Great, great. After so many years, there is finally someone among us dog-headed people who can stand up." After he said that, he told the surrounding people about Nam's participation in the selection. The dog-headed servants, who were already exhausted, stood up one after another when they heard this and surrounded them. After Namu confirmed this matter, the crowd instantly burst into cheers as if they were about to be liberated. Nam revealed a smile and pointed in my direction. "Everyone, hold on for a few more years. Once Duoji and I enter That Academy and have the cultivation of a monster king, you can go home." Go home. Ever since they had become servants, the word "go home" had nothing to do with them. The dog-headed servants who had already submitted to their fate were stunned when they heard that. They seemed to have never thought that they would have the chance to return to their hometown in their lifetime. Not long after he said that, Ao2O's coughing could be heard from the bamboo forest. It was obvious that Nam's time was up. The crowd instantly understood and quickly dispersed from Nam's side. Only Uncle Chael was still bidding farewell to him. "Little Nam, oh no, you've already grown up. I can't call you that anymore. No matter if you can successfully enter That Academy or not, you have to protect yourself. You have to be patient and don't make any mistakes. If not..." Nam seemed to know what he was going to say. Before he could finish his sentence, he snatched the stone away. "Don't worry, Uncle Chael. Duoji and I are very powerful. We will definitely successfully enter That Academy." After he said that, Uncle Chael looked over. Seeing me nod at him, he responded. A few seconds later, Ao2O's figure appeared in the forest. Seeing that, Uncle Chael pushed Nam over while he picked up the stone slab from the ground and walked to the side. Ao2O wiped the grease from the corner of his mouth and looked at the calm Nam. "You two little fellows, when the city lord comes, you can't stay here anymore. It's best that you leave quickly." After he said that, he turned and left. Looking at Ao2O's back, Nam held it in for a long time before he finally thanked him. I wasn't sure if Ao2O heard him, but he pulled me back the way we came. Nam didn't tell me anything about Uncle Chael, and I didn't ask him about it. After we returned to the inn, he went into his room and immersed himself in his cultivation. When night fell, Nam didn't forget about Tana. He woke up from his cultivation and stood guard at the window with me, staring at the side door of the brothel. Our luck was pretty good that night. After a short while, a horse carriage appeared in the alley outside the window. Under the bright moonlight, Nam and I noticed the hunchbacked half-beast man driving the carriage at the same time. It was the rat tribesman that we had fought with a few days ago. Nam wanted to jump off the bed in a hurry, but I extended my hand to hold him back and asked him to calm down. Last time, it was because we were too anxious that the rat tribesman managed to escape. If we were to make the same mistake again, I'm afraid that the rat tribesman wouldn't give us another chance to save Tana. At that moment, the rat tribesman had just entered the alley and was still quite a distance away from us. I observed for a while to confirm his current position and that he wouldn't easily discover us. Then, I called Nam and quietly climbed out of the window. We slid along the wall into the alley and hid in the shadows on both sides of the road. At that moment, the rat tribesman was leisurely walking in our direction. He was still wearing the tattered clothes from a few days ago. He was humming a song that I couldn't understand. He was holding onto the mane of a ferocious beast. Behind the ferocious beast was a handcart with a dozen women lying on it. I used my spiritual sense to investigate and confirmed that Tana was among them. When the rat tribesman walked to the corner where Nam and I were hiding, I waved at Nam and simultaneously moved, sandwiching the rat tribesman in the middle. Suddenly, someone jumped out, scaring the rat tribesman into shrinking his neck and retreating a few meters. Seeing that the person who came was Nam, he calmed down. He tidied up his clothes and said coldly, "Why is it you again, dog-headed man? I let you go that day, but you still dare to come to die today." Nam didn't reply. Instead, he snorted and charged towards the rat tribesman with his monstrous aura. The rat tribesman wasn't afraid and let out a strange cry. We were already prepared, so we naturally wouldn't fall for his trick. Seeing that his attack was ineffective, the rat tribesman's face instantly darkened. He planned to use a bewitching technique, but it was easily countered by Nam. After 2 consecutive attacks that were ineffective, the rat tribesman started to panic. Seeing this, I knew that he was going to spit out the black venom. Nam had already fainted, so I didn't know that he had such a trick up his sleeve. Thinking about that, I moved my legs agilely and appeared behind the rat tribesman in a blink of an eye. Seeing that he was being attacked from both sides, the rat tribesman wanted to dig a hole to escape. I reacted quickly and struck his neck with my palm, knocking him out. After carefully inspecting him, I called Nam and walked towards the handcart. After I unloaded the handcart from the ferocious beast's body, I signaled for Nam to quickly leave this place. Hearing that, Nam's face was filled with doubt. "You're not coming with me?" I pointed at the rat tribesman and ferocious beast on the ground. Nam instantly understood my intention. He nodded and pulled the handcart towards another alleyway. After Nam's figure disappeared from the alleyway, I slowly walked towards the rat tribesman and struck the top of his head with my palm. This rat tribesman was ruthless and had many tricks up his sleeves. Leaving him alive would only attract trouble in the future. Getting rid of him would solve all problems once and for all. Chapter 929. In Rock City, Lord Kratos' brothel was the largest and most luxurious. It was frequented by nobles and the guards weren't bad either. As I hurriedly left, I sensed that the person chasing after me was at least at the Monster King realm. Thus, I quickened my pace. Fortunately, I discovered him in time. After exiting the alley, I arrived at the busiest area of Rock City. Even though it was already late at night, there were many pedestrians on the street. After blending into the crowd, it would be hard for the person chasing after me to lock on to my aura. I heaved a sigh of relief. After intentionally circling the streets twice, I arrived at an alley not far from the inn's main entrance and found Nam. He was currently feeding medicine to the women on the cart. When he saw me return, he was a little distressed as he asked me how he should deal with these women. This was a thorny problem as these women were kidnapped by the rat tribe members. Most of them weren't from Rock City. I would probably have to spend some money to let them return on their own. There was still a lot of gold coins left in the pouch that I got from the pig-headed man. Spending money was a small matter, but the monster region wasn't peaceful. They might meet with danger on their way back. I couldn't help them even if I wanted to. After hearing what I said, Nam nodded. That's the only way. After taking the medicine, Tana was the first one to wake up after a quarter of an hour. When she opened her eyes and saw that we were guarding her, she immediately threw herself into Nam's embrace and cried tears of joy. "Nam, I thought I would never see you again." The sudden hug made Nam at a loss as to what to do. After hesitating for a while, he carefully opened his mouth to comfort Tana to calm her down. As for the other women on the cart, they quickly woke up as well. Compared to Tana's excitement, these women had never seen us before, so they were extremely nervous. I asked Nam to give each of them 2 gold coins. After explaining the situation to them, I let them leave on their own. After dealing with these matters, we brought Tana back to the inn and booked another room. We arranged for the exhausted Tana to rest first, while Nam and I returned to our room. After dinner, Nam didn't talk much about Tana and directly started to cultivate. Seeing how hard-working he was, I felt a little gratified. Presumably, after what happened in the purple bamboo forest today, he truly understood the responsibility he had. We had to thank the Bearman Commander Otto for this. Although he looked fierce and his words were harsh, he was actually a warm-hearted person. He didn't look down on the dog-headed people. Instead, he secretly helped us a lot. For the next 2 days, other than Nam bringing Tana out to buy some clothes, we basically stayed in the inn to continue cultivating. Although it's just an academy selection, it's the only way for me to quickly recover my cultivation based on my current situation. I don't dare to be negligent. 2 days later, early in the morning, the announcement of the Thad Academy was spread all over the city. Students who were applying for the exam emerged from all corners of the city and gathered together, heading towards the purple bamboo forest. Nam and I followed the crowd and headed there. Because I had previously helped Nam open up many of his meridians, and with the help of the spirit pill fruit, his cultivation had directly entered the middle stage of the demon spirit realm. This had increased Nam's confidence by quite a bit. As for Tana, although she was only at the early stage of the demon spirit realm, she was only 15 years old and already had such a high cultivation. Her talent was evident. As for me, although I didn't open up any new meridians after 3 days of cultivation, the ones that I had already opened up had already recovered. Passing the Thad Academy's exam wouldn't be a problem. The only difficulty would be to hide my identity. I still didn't know the exact process of the exam, so I couldn't prepare in advance. I could only act according to the situation. When we arrived at the purple bamboo forest, we saw that the stone square that had been empty a few days ago had a high platform. There were 6 or 7 rattan chairs on the platform. Behind the chairs were rows of bearmen soldiers. In front of the chairs was a huge stone vat. Inside the vat was a yellow incense stick that was as thick as bamboo and as tall as a human. At this moment, the yellow incense stick was half burned. On both sides of the incense table, there were 4 large drums made of cowhide with 4 bearman soldiers holding drumsticks on standby. Including us, there were already a few hundred people gathered at the plaza. It seemed that Otto was right, there were quite a lot of people participating in this year's selection. As the yellow incense burned out, the 4 bearman soldiers beat the huge drums. In an instant, the noise in the plaza quieted down. At the same time, a few orcs dressed in luxurious clothes walked out from the high platform. Different from the normal orcs, these people didn't look much different from humans, except for their ears and canine teeth. They should have the cultivation of Monster King and above, since they had completely transformed into human form. Soon, there was a commotion in the crowd. From what they said, these people were the elders in charge of the 5 gates of Thad Academy. They took their seats, leaving the most central seat empty. It should have been reserved for the principal. However, when a middle-aged man wearing a golden robe with dozens of wolf heads embroidered on it appeared, everyone exclaimed in surprise. They all knelt down and shouted, "Greetings, City Lord." City Lord? This person was the City Lord of Rock City. Could it be that he was the one hosting the selection today? Very soon, their guess was confirmed. The City Lord, who was obviously from the wolf tribe, waved his sleeves and signaled for everyone to rise. Then, he said, "Principal Shibo has been in seclusion for many days. Today's selection will be hosted by me. Everyone, there's no need to be reserved. Just display your talents to the fullest." After saying that, he turned to look at the purple-robed elder, leaving the rest to him. The purple-robed elder understood and cupped his hands at the City Lord before walking to the front of the stage to announce the start of the selection. Following his voice, a series of drum beats sounded. This time, the drum beats were different from before. It seemed to be hurried, but the rhythm was very subtle, as though it was a spell to activate a magic tool. As expected, when the drum beats entered the ears, the expressions of the people in the surroundings turned ugly. There were even some who suddenly fell to the ground with their eyes turning white and their limbs twitching. My body was much stronger than the others, so the drum beats had no effect on me. However, Nam and Tana, who were by my side, weren't as calm as me. They squatted on the ground and covered their ears, looking like they were in extreme pain. As the drum beats increased in speed, many of the people in the surroundings squatted or collapsed. There were only a few people who could remain as calm as me. After another 10 seconds, the drum beats increased in speed again. Apart from me, there was only one person left in the plaza. I looked over curiously and noticed that this person had cat ears and a cold expression. It was obvious that he was from the cat race. His cultivation was around the middle stage of the monster spirit realm. He didn't seem to be anything special, but I didn't know how he was able to withstand such intense drumbeat. The cat race was considered to be a race with high talent among the half-beast race, far surpassing the kobolds. So, seeing that there were only the two of us left in the plaza, the gazes of the city lord and the few elders gathered on me. They seemed to be discussing something in low voices. I naturally didn't want to attract their attention, so I pretended to faint and collapse. At that moment, I heard Nam's painful groans from my side. I turned to look and saw that his face was contorted with blood seeping out of his mouth and nose. Tana's condition was even worse. She was currently twitching on the ground. Seeing this, I immediately pretended to be in pain and fell to the ground. I moved closer to Nam and Tana and softly chanted a Taoist heart-cleansing incantation to help them get rid of their pain. The grade of the heart-cleansing incantation was very low and didn't require much qi. However, it was extremely effective at that moment. The painful expressions on Nam and Tana's faces quickly eased and they regained their calmness. The sound of the drum continued for half an hour. After the last hammer fell, the first stage of the competition finally ended. At that moment there were less than 200 people who could barely stand up in the originally dark plaza. The rest of the people were carried by the Bearman soldiers to the resting building to receive treatment from the Medicine Research Institute. A purple-robed elder stood up from his seat and walked to the front of the stage. He said in a clear voice, "Congratulations to everyone for passing the first stage of the test. However, the next stage of the test will only be stricter. Only the bravest half-beastmen will be able to pass." After saying that, he waved his hand at Aotua as though he was giving some kind of order. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.